All good, all good. All right, it is 1 p.m. or thereabouts this afternoon, and I will call this City Council workshop of October 23rd, 2024 to order. I am presiding today at the request of Mayor Wright. It is with deep sadness that our community mourns the loss of Lieutenant Commander Lindsay Evans and Lieutenant Serena Wildman of VAQ 130 from Naval Station Oak Harbor, Whidbey Island. Please join me in a moment of silence for their honor. Our heartfelt sympathies are with the families of these fallen naval aviators and with the sailors and the entire Growler community of NAS Whidbey. Flags at the City of Oak Harbor have been lowered to half-staff with the permission of the governor. We join NAS Whidbey in asking that everyone provide each other grace and respect as we all grieve this loss. This kind of thing happens very infrequently, and it hits the whole community hard when it does. Thank you. Today's meeting may be viewed live on YouTube, Facebook, and following the meeting on cable channel 10, HD 1090. Public comment is not normally taken at workshop meetings, although council may allow or request public participation on action items. We have one action item on our agenda today. Staff has requested that we move Parks and Recreation items A and B forward in our agenda report today to following council comments and prior to the monthly departments report. Are there any objections? All right, hearing none, we will approve the agenda as amended. Now I will turn to City Council before we get the agenda started off to see if they have any questions, comments, anything for the good of the order before we get down to business. No? All right. Okay, so first up, we will do our action item, Recreation Conservation Office, No Child Left Inside grant application. And to present, we have our grants administrator, Wendy Horn. Wendy? Yes, please. Sorry, yeah, the setup's changed a little.
So, good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I'm Wendy Horn. I'm the Grants Administrator. I'm going to be presenting the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Office No Child Left Inside grant program. Are we good?
Our screen, yeah, it was the
There we
same
go.
as our screen. Thank you.
Okay. So the RCO offers a wide variety of grants, over 25 different grants, with a combination of state and federal funding, and it's their goal to invest in Washington's great outdoors. The No Child Left Inside grant was established in 2007. The goal is to improve the overall academic performance, self-esteem, health, community involvement, and connection to nature with youth, and empower local communities to engage youth in outdoor education and recreation experiences. So our Parks and Recreation Department would like to develop the Whidbey Outdoor Ready program. And the goals for this program would be to increase outdoor readiness and environmental knowledge among children, promote outdoor recreation as a fun, healthy, and accessible activity for families, foster a sense of stewardship and responsibility for the local environment, and provide inclusive opportunities for all children to participate in outdoor recreation and education, regardless of their financial status. So some of the components that Parks and Recreation have come up with as they're developing the grant application is community engagement. There would be Saturday outings, hiking events, educational trail talks, cleanup events, outdoor clinics, after-school clinics, arts, STEAM classes, and then summer camps that would be free to children, and they'd be about a week long each. And the goal would be that there'd be about 10 over the summer. And they are looking to partner with the Soundwater Stewards and the Washington State Parks. So the No Child Left Inside grant has 3 tiers. The first 2 tiers do not require a match. The first one is up to $25,000. The second one is up $5,000 to $75,000. And that is the one that the Parks and Recreation Department would like to apply for. They would split it up between staffing and equipment for a total of $75,000. And of course, the deadline is next week, October 31st. And that is all I have. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Wendy. At this time, I will turn to council for questions and comments. Since this is an action item, we could take public comment on this if anybody present has a comment, or did we receive any comments, Julie?
No, Mayor Pro Tem, we received no comments on the item.
Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to this item? For the record, Councilmember Hoffmeyer is attending remotely. Hi, Shane.
Hi.
All right, council, what would you like to do with this? Questions, comments? Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you. So yeah, I love this, Wendy. I don't really have any questions for you, but since this is a workshop, I'm going to ask everybody to bear with me because I'd like to actually take this a step further. I see Brian's already prepared for me to, and understand, I'm not going to hold you to any of what I'm about to ask you. But what is the average? I know we have a lot of programs for youth in the summer, ages, well, we'll just say 6 through 12, right? What is the average cost of a day camp or one of our day activities for a kid in that group?
A youth program, average cost would be maybe about $35, $45. For a day camp, usually which lasts about a week, would be, maybe 3 times that amount, more like 100 or so.
Yeah, but the day event, the few hour event.
Yeah.
And here's what I'm thinking, and we'll work on this together as we move forward. But I love this idea, right? And because as you remember when we talked about this, the No Child Left Behind was actually one of the things that I knew we were going to need to focus on as we moved forward with this. And quite frankly, with this coming up on our second year, it's imperative for us to start backfilling a lot of these classes, right, and really start getting this thing off the ground because, as you know, we're kind of expecting year 3 for this to be a revenue neutral program, and obviously attendance and getting more kids to come the first time, and then getting kids to come back is huge. So what about if we offered a voucher program where somebody like myself could come along and say, I want to buy $130 vouchers to be given out to children in the community that wouldn't be able to attend one of those functions in the summer normally. I'd be able to hand those vouchers out, for example, to school teachers, let them hand them out to class. It'd be a way, another funding stream. A certain amount of the vouchers are not going to be redeemed, right? So that's why I'm looking kind of for an average, right? If we could come up with an average amount. It would give the people ability that when they're booking online this summer, they would even have the ability to check a box where they could purchase a voucher for a kid who couldn't afford. Right, and then that stuff would come into our pool. Our otter mascot, when he's out in the community, would have some vouchers to pass out to children visiting Boys and Girls Club, etc. Something you think we should talk about some more?
Yeah. Hey, Tim, there's a picture file in the presentation folder, recreation program timeline. Would you throw that up there? And let me speak to a couple of things that you mentioned there. So first of all, with this program would be free to participants, right?
And my comments were kind of unrelated. I can say, for Wendy, I have no question about this. I love this. I'm just trying to take this a step further because we're on the discussion, right, of how do we serve underserved youth with the programs we have moving forward.
Yep. Yeah, and we're very interested in doing that. So this is year 1 for us, right? So last year, council approved, recreational programming. We got those first started up in the beginning of this year. We had some issues with our hire. They backed out the week they were supposed to start, so that pushed us back a little bit. So we really got started with Craig there in March of this year. So you kind of see the timeline, and where we're at is that green line right there. So we have in our decision packages not only revenue generating program, but we do have a couple of programs in there that are not revenue generators that are meant to be subsidized by other revenue generating programs for at-risk youth or underserved populations. Something that I know that the mayor has mentioned wanting to support, and we would like to find ways to do that through a scholarship program, through sponsorships from organizations and from the public, do something like a competitive tournament, and all the proceeds from that, like corporate games, right? All the proceeds of that go into a scholarship that kids can then apply for if they like qualify for a free lunch program or something like that.
Well, and again, I'm thinking from a marketing standpoint, right? There's people in the community such as myself who let's make it as easy as possible for the contribution, right? And the fact that I place my hand on a physical voucher means something, right? The fact that I can hand that voucher off to, an organization I would like to, with instructions as to how to pass that out. I'll put it to you this way. You come up with a program like that, I will buy the first 100
All right, deal.
vouchers.
Got it.
Okay? Fair deal?
Like the idea.
Okay? Incentive? All right. Thanks for hearing me out. I appreciate it. And love the grant. And thanks again, Wendy, for all you're doing. I mean, you get, and we've said this before, but bringing on you and a grant coordinator was a huge decision. And obviously, it has paid off huge for the city. Thanks for all you're doing.
Counselor Stuckey.
I think you should have said $1,000 a child and then change your mind after the vouchers were purchased. It's very kind of you. In regards to this grant and this program, was this something that was in the works regardless of the grant?
Yeah, we have talked about doing outdoor recreation programming, which is meant for a later phase, just because a lot of them are more based on what we call correct term for it, learning outcome type based programs, right? They're more educational based, so they tend to be higher subsidy rather than straight revenue generators. So this was an opportunity for us to bring those programs forward and offer it free for the community.
So if the grant is not awarded, will it then go back into the pipeline for another day?
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Counselor Arms, do you have any questions or comments? I have one question. You mentioned a STEAM program. What is that?
Yeah, STEAM is a science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
Arts and-
The new STEM?
There's
Yeah.
both.
So
There
they-
is
so they
STEAM
add-
and STEM.
Yeah, so they've added arts to the STEM.
Love it. All of the things. Okay, council, we have an action item.
I'll jump in if I can.
I'm so sorry, Shane. I'm so sorry.
You're fine.
Go
Brian, hey, this is amazing. I know when many of us are out in the community talking with people or knocking on doors, often we're told, hey, there's nothing to do here. There's not enough to do here. So like with everything else you're doing, we're seeing you, deal with that and combat that. And Wendy, I mean, my gosh, you were so good at getting these grants in on time, et cetera. Having worked on this NCLI grant before, geographically our closeness to the state parks and having our own transportation with that bus that we bought, I would think those two things would help us score pretty highly here.
Yeah, we do have a really good partnership with state parks. They're one of our support letter organizations. Joy with the state parks here that service Whidbey Island has been an amazing partner, and we hope that they'll continue to do so if we get this grant to do joint programming with them with it.
Well, this is exciting. I wholly support it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Shane.
Counselor Hoffmeyer, I'm not sure if it's possible for you to maybe turn your I don't know, microphone down or speakers down a little? There's a big echo coming from, I think it's your, yeah, I'm not sure.
I will see what I can do.
Okay, yeah, if you maybe just turn your speakers down a little. But thank you. Okay, all of council has weighed in. At this time, I would entertain a motion of some kind. Councilor Stuckey.
Can we put the suggested motion back on the screen? I move to approve the application to the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Office for the No Child Left Inside grant.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councilor Stuckey, seconded by Councilor Hoffmeyer to approve the recommended action as presented. Is there any further discussion? Questions, comments? All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've already updated the script with the amended agenda. I was going to skip ahead, but it's right there. Okay, next up, future of the Oak Harbor Marina. Introduce our Parks and Recreation Director, Brian Smith. We'll introduce this topic as well as our Harbor Master, Chris Sublett. There's going to be a review of the information gathered from the 2 marina open houses, and our Deputy State Administrator, David Goldman, will review the financial considerations. And we also have a few members of our Marina Advisory Committee here as well. So don't know if Chris wants to start or Brian wants to start, but take it away.
So thanks for having us here today. We are going to talk about the future of the marina. We're going to go through this presentation pretty quickly so we can get to the questions and hopefully provide some good answers. And we're also going to split this up between Brian and myself. So today, just to give you an idea of what we're going to try to do, we want to provide information on the marina options. We want to talk about funding options. We want to talk about and review the open houses that we had. And we want to share some comments from the Marine Advisory Committee, and as you mentioned, there are some here, and if you'd like to hear directly from them, I'm sure they'd be happy to do that and answer some questions as well. One of the things we're not going to do is make any decisions today. This is just information, but really the goal is to provide the council enough information to determine which option and funding sources they prefer and enable them to provide us, staff, with direction at the November 19th council meeting. So as we dive into this, you are very aware that the marina is now 50 years old and we had a wonderful celebration. We have a lot of challenges. The marina is silting in at a pretty rapid rate. Our breakwater is failing, and the docks and systems within the marina, you know, the water, sewer, and electricity, we're having all kinds of challenges with that as well. The big one that we're seeing that's happening is the channel is silting in, and eventually it will. The cost of that is really unknown, but we estimate it to be somewhere around 50 million. It could be more even, we're not sure. We did explore if it was a federal channel and worked with the Army Corps of Engineers on that, and it was determined that it is not a federal channel, and therefore the Army Corps of Engineers is not interested in helping us dredge that. The cost of these projects, all of these projects, is more than the marina can afford. The chart at the bottom gives you an idea of the timeline of what we estimate each one of those challenges has left in it. And you can see that the silt-in breakwater in marina infrastructure, we estimate that things are going to happen around 2028, 2029. We're going to start to see some pretty massive and catastrophic failures. The channel we believe will go till about 2038, and again, that's just an estimate. We haven't done any surveys out there or anything. Just a reminder that our marina is a regional marina. 77% of the tenants of the marina are from Island County, with 49% of that 77% from Oak Harbor and 25% from Coopville. So we have a lot of marina tenants that are from the city or from our neighbors down south. Just a quick financial review of the marina. Dredging the marina is going to be about $11.8 million. We plan on using about $1 million in reserves. We also found out recently that we still are in contention for that $1 million grant from the county, so that's looking really good. The big challenge with that is we're still going to have a huge debt service. Our debt service is going to be around $862,000 a year. And just as a reference, we're currently paying $350,000 a year in debt service, which will end in 2025. But if you look at our rates and our dredge fee, you can see that that's going to have to more than double to cover that. There's just simply no way the marina can afford all of this at one time, let alone the dredging. It's going to be interesting to see how it works out. Our annual revenue is about $2.3 million.
Chris,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. When you say we currently have $350 in debt service, do you mean the marina or the city?
The marina.
Thank you.
That's what we're currently paying in
Thank
the previous dredge. We have about $2.2 million in reserves. And again, the dredging debt service may be unaffordable for the marina. So as we look at the three options for the marina, and these are options that we've identified and we've talked with the public about, and we'd love to hear more ideas. So this is what we've come up with internally. And the three options are removal and replacement of the marina, renovation of the existing marina, and then closure of the marina. And you can see the timelines there. Each one of them is in a phased approach. And you can see that the removal and replacement of the marina spans out for many years, several years. And then the renovation isn't a quick thing either. That's a several-year project. The closure of the marina, we can't just walk away from the marina. We have to clear out everything that's there, and that'll take a few years as well. So the first option, remove and replace the marina. We know that the dredging is $11.8 million. We know that the breakwater replacement's about $7.5, and we know that the demolition and removal of the redevelopment of the marina is almost $25 million. The estimated cost for that is $44 million. There's really pros and cons to it. We get a brand new marina. We can accommodate larger boats, and the lifespan will last longer of the marina. The disadvantage is, obviously, it's the most expensive option. It could take several years to implement, and that years could be replaced with decades. As an example, Des Moines is doing a 15, 20-year replacement project right now. It'll definitely increase the rates at the marina, and it doesn't touch the channel at all, so we still have that out there. Renovation of the marina is much, much less expensive. We can renovate the docks, breakwater, electrical, and mechanical for $13.2 plus the dredging. We're at $25 million approximately for that. It'll have less of an impact on the rates, and it'll provide more time to determine replacement options. The challenge is it only extends the life 10 to 15 years. So, we'll have time, but we won't have a lot of time. It doesn't really reduce any siltation issues. And again, this one doesn't touch the channel issue as well. The final one, and this one here is the least popular, obviously, amongst all of the people we've talked to, is closing the marina. And it may be the only choice if we can't find funding. And we're not alone in this. There's many marinas that are in our age category using the same Bellingham marine construction that are having challenges finding funding to replace their stuff as well. It could either be a hard or a phase close, more than likely a phase close. We definitely lose the amenity for Oak Harbor community and Whidbey Island. Again, our population, our marina, services this island basically. And the cost to remove everything is estimated at $10 million, but it's likely that it could exceed that by a considerable amount. It does release the city from the financial responsibility. It could reduce public concerns, and the upland area may be able to be repurposed for something else. The disadvantage is that there's no revenue source to cover the removal costs of the marina. And there's no marina to pay for that, so the city would have to figure out a way to do that. Again, using $11.8 million as a bond for the dredge. You can see that the debt service on 10 million or likely more is going to be a large amount as well. The city will lose the estimated $380,000, and by city I mean the city of Oak Harbor here at City Hall. This marina pays. And then the businesses around to lose the estimated $5 million that the marina tenants and guests put into the city. So just in summary, to remove and replace the marina, including the channel, is about $94 million, and to renovate the marina is $75 million. As an example of what that means, Elliott Bay Marina in Seattle in 2021 sold for $80 million. They are a super marina that can host super yachts. They have 1,200 slips, and about 50% of them are 36 feet to 50 feet. They have a ton of amenities. They have restaurants, bars, a little store there. And their rates are, on a 40-foot slip, they charge $23.57 per foot per slip. And it goes up as the boats get bigger, compared to our current rate of $12.38. So when we're looking at these bigger numbers, and our marina surely will not be 1,200 slips, you can imagine what our rates will be. And you can see the picture of Elliott Bay there, and you can see Seattle in the background to get a good idea of where it is. And location does raise the rates. I mean, there's a cost to be there, but a lot of that cost is to recover the investors $80 million. So Brian will take the financial piece of this.
All right, so these aren't so much options as just strategies for how do we pay for this. Though, these are, eye-watering numbers that we're talking about, especially when you're considering the channel. How do we possibly get to point B here? There are almost as endless amount of strategies as you can think of. We really only have the ability to control a few of those, though. And those really are looking at the formation of a port district, going after grants and other legislative support, and then looking at tax options here in the city and channeling a portion of that into the marina. There are others as well, and we'll just touch on that at the very end here. But none of these are what we call a silver bullet. There's not going to be okay, let's choose option one and that'll pay for it. In likelihood, it will require multiple strategies, if not all of them, in order for us to get where we need to be in a stable facility. Port districts are an interesting option. There's 75 ports in Washington. Washington State has more ports than any other state in the country. Their goal is primarily around economic development. Marinas do tend to be the core facility for port districts, but they do much more than just maintain marinas. Many port districts develop infrastructure, retail, housing, all kinds of different activities that help support really what is their goal of economic development. The geographic boundaries are usually around a county boundary. They could have sub-county boundaries as well. It requires a majority vote of 51% voter approval. Port districts usually come with a lot of job creation. It would not just be focused only on the marina, but they would also focus on other developmental activities that help with job creation, increase grant opportunities, because about 99% of grants that are available are only available for port districts. And we see the benefit of that to all the marinas around us, as Oak Harbor Municipal Marina is only one of 2 saltwater marinas in the state. We're at a disadvantage there with being able to apply for and qualify for those grants. Long-term financing of large projects, as well as having streamlined operations and decision-making. There are disadvantages to this, though, and the first and foremost is that this would basically be a handoff of the marina as a city-owned facility into a separate governing body. The port district could be created to make up a representation from the city, but largely would not be owned by the city anymore. The upland areas may not be able to be transferred. That was given over by the Navy. There is a reversion clause that still exists, and so we would need to legally understand what is and is not achievable with that, with city ownership transferring to another governmental agency. It's also a lengthy process and does have cost to it to run an election, as you're aware of. There has not been a port district made in 30 years, although there have been consolidations and annexations and expansions or mergers of port districts within that time. We haven't seen a creation of a new one for a very long time. We have met with port districts around the island, presenting both the option of a joint would-be island port district, as well as maybe merging with neighboring port districts. They're all very excited about the opportunities that would come to Oak Harbor with the creation of a port district, and were very positive and forthcoming in what they saw as benefits of port districts for their communities. As any governmental agency has, there are political implications and considerations with that. A large part of why a port district has not been created in 30 years is that the Puget Sound is one of the most heavily regulated areas in the country. And so creation of just new marinas just don't happen anymore. Which is also another thing to think about with the closure of the marina. If we were to close it or remove it, it's very unlikely we would ever be able to install a new marina again. Grants of legislative support highly contingent on the status of either being a port district, as a lot of those are not available for recreational marinas. Appropriations through a political process are definitely a tool that should be thoroughly explored. We have had our local state legislators that are interested in helping champion that, and especially looking at certain projects like the breakwater is something that they could definitely get behind. We have received funding from them before in the past. We had $300,000 that went towards FDOC. Grants and both the legislative support, they don't have to be repaid. They may help with developing other projects that can be tailored for a specific project, and can be used for matches of other funding sources as well. Some of the challenges with that, though, is that a lot of them are contingent on an entire project being funded, and we're talking about very large projects, right? So we would need to already have some pieces in place, matches for funding of grant funds, have some commitments from legislature and legislative support earmarks to be able to knock out one of these projects. It is a very competitive process, and it might take several years to secure. The third strategy is through special taxes and bonds. We have a number of different options going forward with that. With our current taxes, we have levy lid lifts, tongue twister, or excess bond levies. The city only receives about 1% of sales tax. We're kind of limited in how those sales tax dollars can be utilized. Utility taxes are a very unpopular tax. They've recently been adjusted, and we're very sensitive to those. One of the only options we haven't explored yet, our finance director, David Goldman, has presented on this to council before, is the idea of a business and occupation tax. Has a high revenue threshold. We have a small percentage of businesses that would be affected by that, depending on how that is structured. And it's unlikely that those costs would be handed down at a consumer level or create inflation within the local area. And so it provides a stable revenue stream. However, there are a lot of other city priorities that would want to look at a piece of that pie if we were to go that route. So understanding how much of that could be funneled into the marinas to support bonds and other fundraising endeavors is something we'd have to consider. There is a high elasticity with any kind of business tax. but that is not as unpopular as a property or utility tax. So there are other funding strategies and options, and we'll talk about those. But we did want to get some feedback from the community. We wanted to bring as much information as we could to council around this topic. It's not a fun topic, right? There isn't a no-cost solution. No matter what we choose, there's going to be some financial pain and some difficult decisions with how we go forward with this. And so this needs to be a full community effort. We did a marina tour with both city leadership as well as invited others, leaders around the area to join us, had a roundtable discussion last September with a open house following that on the 18th. We had our anniversary celebration, invited the public out. We took some informal census polls from participants at that event. We had a follow-up open house at the Yacht Club on the 2nd, presenting all this information and getting feedback from participants. And in all those open houses, it was standing room only. We had, at least 50 people in the first one, just as many, if not more, at the second one. We had great attendance. I think we had about 400 people at the anniversary celebration, and has been generating more and more interest from the community to understand what is happening with the marina. We have our Marina Advisory Commission that a lot of them are here today. We've had discussions with them. After this workshop, we'll be looking to council to bring this back for direction from you. We would recommend maybe a joint meeting with the Marina Advisory Commission, Council's Advisory Commission on the marina, prior to that meeting to have some discussions around these options and get some of their perspectives. A lot of them are boat owners and are very familiar with the history of the marina and are a great resource to take advantage of. We received a lot of public comments. Those are in your packet. We won't go over all of them, but we heard things like, maybe different strategies like develop an HOA and selling some of the slips, or creating a stronger identity. There was a lot of interest in the event that we did for the anniversary, and the public would like to see a lot more of that happening. Development around the marina. Comments that we heard a lot of were things like the loss of the marina and the Oak Harbor would be devastating to this community. How do we do this? We can either pay now to keep the marina, or we can pay to abandon the marina. And then how do we restore that area? Looking at different perspectives in how we frame the marina as a key element in our transportation system. Some suggested resiliency for the Navy and having the Navy partner in with some of those. A lot of people wanted to hear what was council and city leadership's vision for the community as whole and the waterfront, and how does the marina fit into that? Can the marina be looked at as critical infrastructure, not only for large disasters, like for an evacuation event, but water rescue, access, and different things like that. And we do have government agencies like the Coast Guard that come and utilize the marina for their operations, as well as the Navy. This gives you a little bit of an idea of preference around some of those options. We asked people, what was your first preference for the future of the marina, as well as your second preference. First choice in green, largely being to renovate the existing marina. Second choice in yellow there. For the funding strategies, the first choice was, there was a lot of interest around the Port District idea and being able to have more access to grant funding and legislative support. The second option being looking at taxes and bonds and having the city contribute more into the capital improvements of the marina, which is something we heard quite a bit of also. So to recap, there are a lot of challenges, and that's what's making this so difficult. If it was simply a discussion around dredging or replacing the breakwater, I think that'd be easy to get our arms around and chew. The fact that we are facing multiple issues, large capital projects all at once, makes this very challenging. I think no matter what, we're going to have to take a phased approach with this. But understanding that this is a regional marina that mostly serves Oak Harbor residents, it has acted very much as a recreational marina. Advantages to that, but there are also some disadvantages, especially when it comes to funding capital projects. The marina has supported itself, been independent of tax dollars or any other contribution from the community for its entire 50-year operation. The marina, I think we can find those strategies to continue to move forward to do that. Operational wise, even figuring out the dredging, even though that's becoming more and more expensive. But these additional infrastructure projects just we're not able to cover that cost through regular marina operation revenues. So the paths really are to replace the marina in its entirety, to redevelop that, or to renovate it, which buys us some time. That gives us some time to make some decisions on do we start planning for the closure of the marina, start developing funds to implement that, or do we look at a replacement strategy? That gives us a little more time to have these discussions, but there is a cost to that. And the main factors there are the dredging, which is critical, that needs to happen immediately. The breakwater, which is also the other infrastructure project that we're really concerned about, simply because our insurance is about at the end of the road there. So if we have too many more major storm events that create damage that requires us to do repairs of that, we might not be insurable after that. And then closure of the marina, which is, I think from public feedback, from discussions that we had, 0 people voted for that option, by the way. And it wasn't just boat owners that came to these meetings, largely boat owners, but we had a lot of people that were not marina users of day to day, had no interest in closing the marina and felt that the marina was a part of our identity in Oak Harbor. As our logo on our city logo shows. So funding strategies, again, formation of a port district. That's a hard decision for the city. We lose control, but it does offer a lot, it opens a lot of doors for funding opportunities. Legislative support, which should definitely be approached and worked with our local legislators, regardless of how we go forward. They are willing to work with us, and we should definitely pursue that. Grants are going to be limited until there's a formation of a port district. And I think the discussion on taxes or other type of city support is a conversation that needs to happen. There are other options, right? So things like moving the marina into the general fund. David's first question is going to be, where's the revenue going to come for that? That's, those are discussions that would need to happen. Private sellers, we're really looking at there is no option that's off the table, right? But we know that there are a few that we can control and make a decision on. The public does not want to close the marina, and we are going to ask you to give us direction at a meeting in November next month. It's up to you whether you want to have a meeting with the MAC, a joint meeting before then, to have a little more back and forth discussion, but we are kind of out of time, and so we do need direction. So we really just want to open it up for what your questions are, and we like to talk about the hard questions, the ugly questions. What information do you not have yet to make a good informed decision on how to move forward?
Thank you, Brian. David Goldman, before we move to discussion, do you have anything you want to add regarding the financial side, or we can just ask you questions, okay? All right, at this time I will, go ahead. Our Public Works Director, Steve Schuler, has his hand up.
Well, thank you. Is it on right now? I don't think it is.
The light's supposed to go on. It's on?
Is it on? Well, I'm pushing it. Let's try this one. I don't know if these are plugged in.
Move this power?
All right. Yes, I'll go just so the, go up here, is that all right?
Of course.
Yeah, it's unplugged.
Yeah, is this one
It's
working?
plugged in.
Yep. Okay, do you mind? I'm sorry.
It's all
I just
good.
think that, if you don't mind. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, the more perspectives, the better.
Yeah, no, thank you for the perspective, and I've been here 2.5 years, and part of my job in my career of 30-plus years is kind of thinking outside the box. And so first, I wanted to say that Brian and Chris are amazing, and they are a tremendous asset to this community. So they are tremendous. So this is, I'd like the council to consider a fourth option, and this is not just a marina option. This is really much different. So it's not just a marina option, it's really combined. And one reason this is really on my mind is all the discussions we've been having with you about redevelopment of the waterfront district and our downtown, which is the same issue, right? Here we are again, but it's a different one. And we're going to be talking about our water system, which is the same exact discussion. What do we do? No easy answers. So I totally agree. We do not want to close this. So then there's two other options, a $94 million option and a $75 million option. I'm going to use a little bit of hyperbole to cut to the chase. Those aren't going to happen. They're possible. It's possible the feds and the state will come in and miraculously that will get paid for by somebody else. But from what we know right now, those will not move forward. We might have a port district. We might use general fund money, but they're just, the amounts are too much. Right? We can get a little bit of a tiny down payment, but we need something else. So here's kind of the fourth option, and that is where I think we need to check in with what the Navy, what the U.S. military, how they own our current land. Do they have rights to take the land that we own right now away and use those for U.S. military purposes? And if we're going to go spend $74 million or $95 million, when do we go reach out to our city attorney to verify what we own today? And then secondly, the fourth option would be a real estate / marina option. And if you know, like the Port of Anacortes, in a waterfront community, the advantage is having the water, but the real advantage is the assets that sit on the land that are connected to the water. So the fourth option is to create a land / marina option where we truly work, and that might be a port district that in the end maintains and operates this. But this is where the big asset is the marina, but the even bigger asset is the land behind the marina. And that would take the Navy, the U.S. military, to say, yes, we are going to give, or whatever that process is, a portion of our land that has been underutilized, right, is to use that word, maybe use a different word, for 80 years since the closure of World War II. It has been underutilized, and there's a better use for it. Let's do it in a way that benefits the community, that benefits the environment, that does a lot of other ways to really create a 100-year plan so that you can be proud of building that for this generation and the future generations of a land and marina-based solution. And again, I'm trying to use hyperbole, but I think that is your only option you have before you, is to pursue that, and that's the one you should pursue first and foremost, and these other ones will always be in your back pocket. Now, as I know you all know, that's not an easy solution. It's going to take a lot of energy. That's enough for another discussion. But that, I think, is something you should consider, is that number 4. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. All right, Councilor Arms.
Okay, I can never remember what rank anybody is, but our new base, the new guy.
CO?
Yeah, the new commander, thank you. I'm just having those days. I had talked to him recently at the military appreciation, and I mentioned about the fencing there and about moving it or doing something. Then I met him at another function, and he brought it up. So I think it's probably not a good time to really talk about anything, but I think he's willing to listen. I just got that feeling. If you can remember me chattering to you on Saturday at a function, and you see me on Thursday, and you reminded me that we had talked about it, that gave me hope that he at least listened. So I think that's really important. And we had also talked about the B&O tax, which, David, I have to have more explanation of that. something to tide us over while we're working on a port. You know, we can do multiple things, like he said. We can ask the Navy for something, who knows how long that'll take. But we can ask, and then we can also do the port. But in the meantime, get some tax money so we can do some of that dredging while we're looking for the other options. We just can't say, okay, we're gonna wait. Well, we can't wait. We have to have money now, unless somebody wins the lottery and somebody gives us money. And we also have the option with some other ideas, because Rick Larson's community liaison was at both the functions. And I've talked to him about some things, and we have some other things going on, Chris and I am going to reach out to him again. I know it's campaign season, I know he's busy, so hopefully we can talk to him about some other ideas, because one of the big assets we have, don't ask how this happened, is the salmon. We brought salmon to the marina, and that is critical for everything, for climate change, because if we lose the marina and we silt it, we will kill the fish and the wildlife's there. I mean, the wildlife will get on the land, but it will kill it. And so we are putting the salmon in there. We have a run that came back, and that is a big thing. It's the preservation. I think it's the thing that we can say to the feds and the state, hello, you know, you're worried about the salmon, we got it, you need to help us. So that's just an idea that I have out.
Thank you for that contribution, Councilor Arms. Lots of good ideas. Councilor Wiesner?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Brian, Chris? Yes, all of the above. Right, because that's the reality, right? There is not going to be a single solution to this. Federal government and state money is going to be imperative in this. Looking at the sources of those revenues, such as transportation dollars from Congressman Larson's office, money from the Army Corps for recreational, obviously creating a breakwater and making our bay calmer and more of a natural bay, paddle boats, all sorts of things could happen on the bay with some protection, right? Little unsafe for a newbie in a canoe or a kayak to go out there right now, but with that protected bay would be obvious, right, for recreation. I think the challenge is transportation, figuring out a way to get transportation brought back in the marina, whether it be passenger transportation or commercial good transportation. I think the commercial good transportation even bolsters the emergency service response issue, right? Because right now, how would we get commercial goods onto the island if the ferries were down and the ultimate catastrophe, right? And the bridge collapsed, right? But I think certainly federal government and state partners are going to be important. As you know, that takes consistency to get that done, right? So this is going to be a multi-year deal, right? And we can't kick the can down the road anymore, right? We've got somewhere between 0 and 5 years, right, to come up with a program, right? But we're going to have to be very consistent about this, and we're going to have to be consistent about the message. Not only we deliver to our federal and state partners, but to our stakeholders here in the city. Training and understanding about what a port district is going to be important if we're going to pursue that. And yes, on the surface, that appears as probably the steadiest source of revenue and the most common source of revenue for what we're doing. Obviously, albeit tough to get, but at the same time, I think we can do it. It's just people have to understand a port district is actually an economic driving force. It's not a marina. It's not an airport. It's not an entity. It's not a single thing. It's a concept. It's putting taxpayer dollars into things that are going to pay the city back or the port back and allow the port to develop other economic drivers in our city, such as sports fields can be developed by ports authorities, right? Community centers can be developed by port authorities. Commercial pads, industrial zones can all be developed by port authorities, right? And it's very broad sweeping, but people have got to get out of their mind a port authority is is a marina, or a port authority is a wharf in Coupeville. And that's going to take years of clear, direct messaging. The thing is, we can't let our foot off the gas this time, right? And that's what happens, right? We do this, and council's part of that, right? Council changes every couple of years, and the direction you get from us and the support you get from us changes, and I get that, right? But I think if we're consistent and clear in our messaging, and we continue with our foot to the pedal, we don't allow that lifting, we don't allow that pumping of the brakes. We've got to be clear with this message. We either act now and come up with a plan, or we're going to lose the marina. And by losing the marina, we're going to pay dearly in many ways, both financially, and it's one of those things that we're not going to realize how much we miss until we miss it, right? Part of that challenge, and I met with Ken from the Marine Advisory Committee, part of that challenge is going to be getting people down to that marina who have traditionally not come, right? That's going to be the best place to deliver a lot of this message, and how do we do that? And I'm going to be consistent, right? Consistent and clear in what I've said. I would support whatever we need to bring activities down to that marina, especially during the summer months. Activating Catalina Park, kids fishing tournaments every weekend. And I know it's a huge task, but reality is, without the support of the community, and without the community thinking of the marina as more than just a place where a bunch of rich people park their boats, right? We're not going to move past this. And the way we're going to educate them is by having them come down, see what the marina has to offer, realize that even if it's not something they go to every single week, it's part of the community, it's part of the fabric of what we have here. And so that's the challenge, right? We've got to educate the people in our community about port districts and the value of the marina. We've got to continue pressing on our federal and our state partners. And we've got to continue these discussions to come up with a clear path forward. And yes, the Navy's got to be part of that. Upland of that marina is gold, right? Well, the reality is, without the upland and at that marina, a lot of the things we're talking about that are musts for the marina moving forward, such as making larger slips, right? Well, if we make the larger slips, the smaller boats are going to need a place to go. Dry stacking only makes sense. That's what every marina around us has done, and they've done it very profitably, right? I would dry stack my boat in a heartbeat, right, if you guys had a way to do it. And so that conversation, I think the way that's going to happen, though, right, is we're going to have to go to them with a concept. I mean, you know how it works, right? We get a concept drawn out. We get it drawn out on paper. Obviously, we can take that concept not only and show them what we're thinking, but obviously we can get into the morale, welfare, recreation of the military personnel. Of course, the Navy at one time had their own marina, and that's gone away, right? They even had boat rentals where you could rent it was a pretty big sailboat, if I remember right, you could rent. It was kind of crazy that yeah, it was like a 32-foot sailboat or something. You didn't even have to know how to sail, and you could rent the thing. All that's gone away, right? And the reality is we're part of that replacement. We're part of that joint venture for morale, welfare, and recreation for the Navy folks. And I think they would get that as to, what's in it for them. But we've got to go to them, obviously, with a solid proposal and a real idea of what is going to look. They're always going to be curious of what's going to go there. So we got to draw that out for them. But it's going to be a multifaceted approach. I think I challenged Ken the other day. I said, figure out more ways to get the people down there during the summer. I think Brian and I talked about this. Is it even maybe the city purchases a hot dog cart or something down there, right? Because the reality is, if we've got to be consistent about this. This is not going to be, put a hot dog cart down there for 2 weekends and we're good to go. If you're going to go get a hot dog, you got to know it's there. You got to know it's open, and it's got to be some consistency. So we got to have a little control over that, right? Some minimum hours and et cetera. I know Brian had talked about putt-putt golf or something in Catalina Park. Just a ton of things we can do, probably more ideas than we can actually accomplish. But we've got to keep the pedal down. And I would really like to challenge us during this winter to come up with those programs, something happening at the marina every single weekend during the summer that brings the community down there. When the community realizes there's something going on every weekend, they can't make this weekend, they'll make next weekend. I don't have all the answers as to how we do that. That's why we have you guys. But you get, that's what I support, right? Education of the community, education of our folks back in DC, and education of the Olympia folks, and working with our partner, the military, is the start of where we're at right now. And we can't be changing directions every couple of months to get there. We've got this winter to, let's face it, the marina's a quiet, sleepy place in the winter, right? Out of sight, out of mind. Some people here don't even think about going outside in the winter, right? But next spring, we got to hit the ground running. We've got to hit all fours. We've got to take those full meetings that you guys had, and we've got to have people lined up out the door and around the street. We've got to be thinking about larger meeting spaces. When we get to that point, right, now we're ready really to start engaging the community and having a conversation about what they want, because it is ultimately, up to them, ultimately. But the more people we get behind this, the easier that conversation is going to be able to be had, the more educated they're going to be, the more valuable that input back to us is going to be. Because this is one of this is as big a decision as, I hate to bring it up, but the sewage treatment plant, right? This is a biggie, and we can either do it right, or we can just totally blow this thing. And part of doing it right is this education point. And you guys have been doing a great job. You guys have been doing a great job of keeping it front of mind for us. And we just got to continue keeping it front of mind for our community and having the discussions. And I'll support whatever you guys need to do to that end. All right? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wiesner. Councilor Stuckey.
So we were presented with three options. 3.5 once our public works director threw a little wrench in there. Thank you for that. I've often heard some people even up here say, this is or could be the crown jewel of our town. I've heard, what's Oak Harbor without the harbor? I am not that passionate about it. That being said, even I'm not willing to entertain the idea of doing away with it. So I don't want to say there's fear-mongering in that third option. You presented that option with a dollar amount to help us realize the situation. But for anyone listening or watching, I don't think anyone's even breathed the intent of it closing. Even with me being not that passionate about this particular issue, I'm not even willing to entertain that. So while we have that third option, I don't know if we really have that third option. I do have a question or two for Mr. Schuler about what you brought up. You may have to come to the mic, and then I'll dive into what's in the packet here. I'm just trying to think a little logistically there. So what you're insinuating is there's the land that's the federal land, and you're saying there's a value to that land, right? So obviously, first, the Navy would have to agree to give it to us or sell it for nothing, correct? And they may just say no, and then that's the end of that conversation. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think, and this is probably not a new idea for some of you have
Sure.
been here, right? This has been an idea, but I guess I wasn't trying to bring up a new idea. What I was really trying to say, I guess to put a finer point on it, maybe to say it better, is that I think this is the only option. I know there's other options, but thank you. You just knocked the one option off, so thank you. We're left with 2 and 3, renovate or replace, which is 95 and 75. Those aren't going to go anyplace. We're going to spin our wheels. It's not going to happen. Now, maybe I'm wrong, and I'd love to find out I was wrong, and the congressman solves that problem tomorrow and gives us $95 million and says, go and renovate. Right? So really, we need to focus, and I heard it, we need to develop a concept plan and work on the fourth option. And that fourth option is because a port or a city, but let's just pretend it's a port. A port's value is in the upland land, that provides the access and the jobs and the dry storage and the residential housing and the businesses that then depend on the waterfront. So that is the real value. So you're right. So my concern, and I don't know, but my concern is that what's Navy's interest in the land we have right now? The little bit of land we have right now may not be ours. It may be the Navy's. And so before we would go spend 74 million or 95 million, the Navy could come back 10 years later and say, we need it for military purposes. So we have to get that addressed, right? So if that's an issue already, then we might as well sit down with them and say, okay, let's come up with the 100-year plan. And again, this is not a new idea. I think it's just exciting to see that we've all re-engaged now. And like I've heard before from council and from our leadership, is we don't want to just talk about this. We want to really move forward. That's what I'm hearing from all of you, right? So we're going to kind of get serious and kind of kick ourselves a little bit, right? We're not just concepting, and we're going to really come up with something. And what's difficult is, well, why can't we do it like we did in the 1970s? I'm sorry, it just doesn't work that way anymore. Right? So we need to come up with a solution that's better for the community 100 years from now, better for the environment, and I think the Navy would willingly partner with us. And if you make it a partnership with morale and all the benefits that would have that they used to have, this is an exciting opportunity. They are sitting on underutilized property, and I don't want to speak for the Navy, and I'm going to blow it. But those buildings that are sitting on there are really just from a previous life, and they're just slowing, decaying. And they do a little bit of tenant improvements to kind of keep them going, except for maybe the gas station, right? They're just left over from the war, and they have some things that go in them and are not. So, I mean, that has been their plan for 80 years. I'm not trying to say anything bad about the Navy. I'm just saying that's the reality of what they've needed. Now, it's hard for them because what do they need in the future? I don't know. But we don't need all that land. We just need enough. And I don't think I think that's where what I'm trying to say is we as a city should figure out what that is. Maybe it's 2 or 3 options, a little bit of land, a medium amount of land, a lot of land, right? And do we just take the gas station, or do we go all the way to the commissary? I don't know, right? You would work with us. We would put this plan together. It's not going to be that expensive. We don't need to hire maybe economic consultants at this time, but just I really like that idea. Is really put a concept and put it on paper for the community to see, and we should work on that now. And you can talk about the $95 and $74 million all that you want, and again, some of the things we have to do right away, those have to keep going, whether that's the immediate dredging under the docks or things like that. But that bigger plan really needs to happen, and that's the exciting part. So I'm sorry, now you're getting me all excited.
I like when you get fired up. I'm just trying to, first of all, it's perfectly possible that we may have asked in the past, and the answer was no. Not that things don't change, because again, a no answer, then that's off the table. I'm just trying to figure out logistically, trying to understand. You're saying best case scenario, the Navy says, we're going to give you this land. I'm going best case scenario. And then you're implying that we will in turn sell that land to get the revenue to do this? I'm trying to connect the dots here. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think you're asking a lot of good questions, and the short answer is we don't know at this point. But in the 1990s, I was involved in a lot of base closure. That was what I did for 5 years, is worked for the Army Corps of Engineers as a consultant. And because there were so many base closures, that was part of that process is, the military is getting rid of the Sacramento Army Depot. Who gets it now? So there's for every version you can think of, there's something that happened there. But in essence, that is the people's land, right? And you're part of the people. So you're instrumental in saying what's the best use for that land and how does it serve the community, both the community at large, whether that's U.S. military or the local community. And certainly I think all of us, I'm guessing if we polled this room right now, we realize that it could serve a greater purpose than it has. You know what I mean? It serves the wonderful purpose now, but there's a lot of opportunities to have it to serve a greater purpose. So you're right. How much it costs, who does it, how that transfer happens, there's plenty of examples of that, and they all do. But just to use a number of examples, a lot of those former, like the Sacramento Army Depot is one I worked on, but there's many, many others, the Presidio. A lot of those are now city parks, they are residential, they're mixed-use facilities, they're used as Marine base employment operations. Yes, 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 and yes, I think. They used to be military bases. They are no longer. They are now serving the broader community in every possible way you can think of.
And I certainly agree with you having to find out, are you guys planning on taking this land that we're working with right now? Because we don't want to put a bunch of money in something and have it taken away from us. I do agree with you. It'd be wonderful to ask that of the Navy. I'm just trying to also think that things takes time. And we're having a little more immediacy for when it comes to dredging and things like that. And so I like the option. I just don't want everyone to hear, oh, let's just ask the Navy for the land and we'll sell it and problem solved. I mean, there's, as you were implying, there's much more nuance. And right now, I mean, we have to look at Port District. We have to look at all these other things as well, I think.
Right, and I mean, I think the Port District probably would be the natural solution to this. Who's going to run all this now land-based stuff? That probably is going to be a port. I mean, I could just see that. That's the way you would do it. So, I mean, you know, we have 2 senators, we have a congressperson that are part of both working with the military and working with us on a solution. So, I mean, you were primed to create something for the next generation.
So,
You are so blessed that you basically have all the tools you need to make that happen.
so one of the things that I think is a huge consideration here is there's a lot of ideas on the table, but what we're trying to do is understand where you as council want us to move forward. We can do and look at all of these ideas and look at those things, but we're trying to get an understanding of where you want to go next, and we don't want to go too far too fast without you having understanding. We want to keep you in the loop of what's going on because that's this administration's goal. So in that transparent sort of government feel, where is it that you want us to focus our attention? Because again, all of these take time from our staff and efforts and budgetary requirements and things like that. So we can pursue these things and we're having those conversations with legislators, but what are the focus items that you want us to start working on in order to get there? And so I love all the ideas and conversations, but again, those take more conversations. And let's say we went to the Navy before having this conversation with you and it wasn't the direction that you as a council wanted us to go. So we really want to understand when we come back in November, what is it that you are asking us to do as staff to pursue going into the next direction you want to go into? And admittedly, that may be multiple steps that you want us to do and continue to come back with updates, but it's a level of things we need to do. And it's also, do you need more information from certain things? Do you need us to bring back other details? What are the things that you want us to explore so that we can answer those questions for you?
Thank you.
And I have those exact answers for me personally. I just wanted to hear, because that was thrown out, but let me get
No, I
back
understand.
to an elementary question, and then I'll give you one more question or two, and then my thoughts. Because there was additional slides on that. Help me understand. Again, just look at the 2 options we're not even talking about. I see 24.9 million for remove and replace, and I see 25 million for renovate. And then I see a slide that says 70 million and 90 million. Where am I missing a lot of millions?
The channel.
The
So-
channel.
The channel.
Okay.
The channel's a question mark, right? We don't know.
I wanna make
how
sure-
fast or when. If
Okay.
it- you know, Chris said, oh, it'll definitely silt it. We actually don't know that it'll silt it entirely.
Okay.
You know, we just know that the Coast Guard keeps moving those markers a little further in every few years. That would have to get studied so we have a better understanding of what is our time frame with that.
Okay, so I'm going to concentrate not on the channel part, just the part that was in our packet with the renovate, replace, and okay. So Port District B&O tax. Port District, let's say it goes on the ballot next November. Is that still enough time? Like when we keep hearing 0 to 5 years, is that still enough time?
Is that enough time to do all of the repairs and?
Well, I mean, I know that all the repairs and stuff are not going to be done between
Right.
now and November. But if we get no definitive answer, because again, we're putting this out to the voters and they may just say no. If we get the yes and we pursue waiting that year for a yes, or if we did a special major something, is that still okay?
I think that it would work out okay. We'd have to work with the finance department to see what that kind of bonding capacity that would give us and grants and all of that. The grants take a year to get typically, so that may not be enough time. But there may be other options because we are now a port district.
And on the,
Also, I'd just like to say that if the voters approve a port district, it's no longer us. Like, it's no longer the city council. There'll be separately elected officials. Being the port district, we'd have to figure out how to transfer leases and assets and stuff like that. So we'll definitely work with whoever the port district, if it gets approved by the voters, becomes on whatever they need. But, you know, that'll be there. situation, their revenues that they'll be generating through, property taxes or whatnot, and whatever bonding capacity they have, or whatever that works, so.
And keep in mind, when we're talking about timelines, these are squishy number estimates, right? So when we say, in the next 5 years, we have engineers that have inspected it and said, you probably have about another 5 years of good service, and then you're going to see major failures. Well, we're already seeing major failures here and there. So a lot of it's contingent on, really, we could have a major storm event that wipes out a big portion and puts the rest of the marina at risk this year. Or it could go another 15 years and never really have enough damage for it to be an issue. Right?
So one more question I've got, at least what I would like to see. David, with the not replace, just the renovate, the option 2. If we took that $350,000 that is going away in debt service, and we did a B&O tax on 5 million plus, and we combine those totals, does it give us close to what we would need for the renovate, not the renovate and replace? Best guess.
It would be short, because we'd maybe be able to borrow 12 or 13 million. It depends on interest rates and all that stuff too, but just assuming 4.5 and 20 years. Yeah, it would be a little short.
A little, though.
Yeah, it'd be maybe 4 or 5 million short. But I'd have to do, I could do more detail.
But we can maybe also run the numbers based on 4 million gross.
Yeah, or 2.5, or we can run different numbers.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
So here's, as always at these workshops, we're looking for direction. And just speaking as one person here, here's my thought. I'm all for trying for a port district. And if a port district goes through, I'm okay looking at the renovate and replace, because we got that stable income, probably more than we get from a B&O tax. I don't know if that will pass, as we've all acknowledged. One of the reasons why I'm not so passionate about it is much what you touched on. I don't use the marina. I would say the majority of people don't use the marina. And there's that mentality of it's for the boaters and the people with the yachts. And I'm not saying that's entirely accurate. But let's be honest, the people attending these workshops are mostly people that are big marina people. Maybe 1 or 2 people who really didn't like it, but if they didn't like it, they would probably say just close the marina, So it's really selling that this is for the whole community, not just for the people that have their boats and throw a pole now and again. So I'm all for going for a port district first, and then if that goes through, a renovate and replace. But that being said, I acknowledge it's not ours. So we need to do a lot of legwork, and we need to be able to hand off a plan to this port district so they don't do something completely different. If that doesn't go through, then I'm more of a fan of the B&O tax on high grossing businesses for just a renovate. I think someone referred to me as a stick in the mud or something who killed the B&O tax the last time. Thank you. Well, and I think that was personally the right decision. If it's 4 million plus, again, your item at Walmart that costs you $100 is now not going to cost you $100.28. They're not going to raise the cost. This idea that it gets passed on the consumer, there'll be a couple contractors where your $200,000 renovation now will cost you $200,400. But this idea that the little business on Pioneer is all of a sudden going to have to raise their dollar candy bar, it's just not going to happen. So Port District, first option to do the whole shebang. Again, not worrying about the channel, acknowledging that probably will not pass, but I'm all for allowing the voters to decide. I don't know if I'm sold on it personally, but I'm okay with allowing the voters to decide. And if not, looking into the B&O tax for just a renovate, making sure it's on high grossing businesses. So that's where I stand.
Thank you, Councillor Stuckey. Councillor Hoffmeyer.
Yeah, first question here. Do we know
Sorry,
for a
Shane?
fact that the
Shane?
Army Corps...
Could you lower your voice a little? Could you speak a little more softly? We're getting that loud.
It's worse than it was
empty
last
room
time.
echo. Yeah.
Do we know for a fact that they
That's
will
better.
allow us to dredge the channel?
Would allow us to dredge the channel if we had the resources to do so?
Correct.
Does anybody know the answer to that?
We haven't even explored that option yet. It would come down to permitting and stuff like that. So no, we don't know at this point.
Okay, that's another, along with ownership of the land, that's another question I would want answered before we spent a lot. I certainly agree with everything that's been said, except especially, I'm glad that our public works director said what he said, because I don't see any way we ever come up with 100 million. None of us support closing the marina, that's for sure. But if you look back over the recent history, we've had mayors that are incredibly supportive of the marina and wanted to grow it or, install a visitor dock. Council members. We've had many, many, many wonderful people on the Marina Advisory Committee. And for 25 years, it's been like banging our head on a concrete wall, because at the end of the day, it's the same problem every time. Where do we come up with the money? And I think when you see that the 1,200 slip Elliott Bay Marina sold for 81 million, it certainly tells us that, maybe this isn't worth what it's going to cost us. And I know none of us support closing the marina. However, it's so much money, maybe we should look at how that money could be spent otherwise, including having a conversation with the Navy on how quickly it may be possible to build a nice, amazing, brand new marina in Crescent Harbor that doesn't have a channel that needs dredged, that doesn't need dredged every 10 years. The amount of money that would save over the life of that marina. So really, ultimately, I know it comes down to the Pentagon having to answer that question. But if there was a way to build a brand new marina in Crescent Harbor and have some upland stuff going on, my gosh, that really could change Oak Harbor. And certainly ties into the conversation that we had that was on the consent agenda a few weeks ago with the land use thing.
Thank you, Councilor Hoffmeyer.
Thank you.
Councilor Armstrong, I'll get to you in just a second. I have some more comments, and then we'll go back around second time. I hardly know where to start. I've got my stuff spread out
From the beginning.
all over the place from the beginning. Take it from the top. Okay. Councilor Wiesner touched on something that, I guess in an abstract way I've always aware of, but I've never really thought about it, and that was the identity and the value of having the marina. Just how do we assign a number to what it's worth just have a marina? As a city with a waterfront identity, with boaters, we can say all day long that the marina generates this and that there's $5 million in economic, whatever in the city, but how do we, if that marina went away, if it was not there and it was not part of our city, what would we miss? And how do you put a price tag on that, I guess, is what I'm thinking. So there are numbers that we can quantify, and then there are some things that you can't quantify, especially for those of us who've, lived here our whole lives. So I think that is why no one is in favor of the closing the marina option. But I do think that it was staff's responsibility to present that, because do nothing is not an option. If we did nothing and walked away, it would still cost us millions of dollars, because we would have to decommission the marina, clean it up, take it apart, all of that stuff. So either way, we're spending millions of dollars. So it's important to present that, but just because that option is presented for information does not mean it's something we're actually seriously considering, unless the overwhelming amount of people want us to do that, and that's clearly not the case. So that leaves us with the two other really expensive, really difficult options. And while it is an eye-watering, I think, Brian, is an eye-watering amount of money for us as a city and for us as a municipal marina, it's chump change to a port district. A quick search just of the Port of Everett, just in the last few years, they've received $17.75 million, $26.5 million, $4.3 million, $5 million, $7.7. It's just And that's just in the last couple of years. The Port of Friday Harbor just received a $7 million grant just to upgrade their shore power and their electric. $7 million for one project, for a tiny marina. So I think that the way to proceed would be, I think if I wrote step 1, research those property holdings. Exactly what does, because we lease some of that land from the state, so DNR, so what does the state own? What does the feds own? What do we own? And I'd be very interested to do some more research into the reversion clause that was mentioned for the Navy, which properties are subject to said reversion clause, and what are the circumstances under which property that's under our control would revert back to the feds. Because if we don't do that research, and literally get a map and draw it out, and we know, exactly every square inch that we're talking about, we can't really dream and propose and ask in, well, not to say in good faith, it's still in good faith, but we wouldn't have an accurate picture, I guess. We want to have an accurate picture of exactly what we're talking about with that, I think, 100-year plan. Just, if we have this, we can do this, and if we have that, then we can't. But we need to know what we're working with. We have to know what we're working with. And Councilor Hoffmeyer's question about who actually not owns the channel, but who would, if we have permission to dredge the channel, if we could go out there and dredge it tomorrow, could we do that? Is it just the state's property and we need a permit? These are all little kind of minutia that is really irritating, but that's the kind of thing that might hang us up further down the road in the process, and I don't want that to happen. So step 1, research the property holdings and know exactly what we're dealing with. Step 2, start educating the community about port districts. Because, we're talking tens of millions of dollars here, which it would cripple us. But as a port district, we would have access to tens of, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm not even exaggerating. So that would change everything. If we have a $95 and a $75 million project without the formation of a port district, I think it'd be unrealistic to expect us to actually pull that off. And if we do the bare minimum in terms of maintenance and keeping things running while the channel is still usable, we have to do that with the understanding that that's only buying us so much time. So I apologize that my thoughts are all over the place. I understand that. So we can brainstorm about RV parks and tiny homes and recreation, all restaurants, all this great stuff. But I think that it's important to kind of get a cohesive picture together, present that to the community, have the community fill in some of those blanks. What do you want to see, so they can see what's possible? Because the Port District is so much more than a marina. It's so much more. So that will be on us to provide that education. And if we can tell people, you will pay X amount a year in, whatever the port thing is, but in exchange, we have access to hundreds of millions of dollars that would, turn this city into the thing that we all know it can be. We know it, we know we can get there. So I would be in favor of the B&O tax on businesses grossing over $5 million. I think we determined that would apply to, David, 27 businesses? 27 businesses? And that would generate, and I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head, would that be 800,000-ish? Would that be enough to do our debt service? Or
Well, that
am I wrong?
combined with the $360,000 that we're paying now, that will be maturing in next year, we can probably borrow, that would be enough to do like 18 million over 30 years.
Okay, see, yep, something like that would help us borrow just what we need to limp along until we can maybe transfer ownership to a port. And on that note, what happens to the projects that we're in midstream on? If the voters tomorrow say, yes, we'll do a port district, if we're in the middle of paying debt service for something, excuse me, or we're fixing something, how does that work when someone else takes over the entity? Do they then take on that debt? Are we still stuck with the payment? How would that work?
I'd have to talk to the bond counsel on that, because you'd have to disclose all this
Right.
to the folks who are providing you with the bonds, and they'd want to know what the situation would be, because they want to make sure that whenever they loan money, they want to make sure that the entity they're loaning money to has an ability to repay. So if there's the possibility that their bonds will go to a different entity,
Yeah.
they're going to want to know that up front so they can price the bonds accordingly.
Sure. Yeah, if that asset's going to change hands. So that, I guess I would put that in the research category because there hasn't been a port formed in a very long time. And so I don't know if there's anybody that can answer that question off the top of their head in terms of how does that change of, and I don't think changing ownership or control is necessarily a disadvantage. I mean, we're a body of elected people and the port commissioners would be a body of elected people. I mean, it would just be another group of people doing the thing that they think so that they are elected to do. So I don't necessarily see that as a disadvantage. It would be a change for sure, but not necessarily a bad thing. I'm looking at all of my notes to make sure I covered everything. Research, I got my research, and Serena, I actually do have some of this written down, so we need a flow chart. So do the port, and if the port district passes, then we do this, and if not, then we do that.
I'm taking notes too, and I appreciate what council's saying, because this is exactly what we've asked for, is the details that you need us to answer so that we're moving in the right direction with you as we move forward through this process.
Thank you. So, yeah, so regardless, pursue the B&O tax, pursue the port district, start researching the actual mechanics and legality of the properties. And yeah, I've got lots of ideas, but we're not there yet. So, okay. Counselor Arms, you had your hand up.
Well, I
Thank
think
you.
it's great.
Thank you.
A great idea. And I think that is the direction that we need. And the other thing you have to realize over there with the commissary and the gas station and all that, they had a furniture store. They got rid of it. They put it all in the NEX. So what are they busy doing? Do they really want to just keep those two things, the NEX and the commissary, because they're not doing anything? So I'm not sure what that building is right now. I've looked at it and it was empty. So what are they downsizing some stuff? And so maybe they'll be more amenable to making us a deal because things are changing. I mean, Otfield is much bigger, growing, and they're doing all that, but they're really not doing anything there where the commissary is. So I'll look at it when I go out and see what it looks like. But I'm just kind of curious. Maybe they're willing to make a deal to get rid of some of that. So, well, you know, with new leadership, who knows? But anyway, I thought I'd bring that up.
Thank you, Counselor Arms. And that is the local base leadership. Every CEO of the base, well, at least the last few that I've talked to, they've generally been supportive of being flexible about that space, but it's not their decision. So that we'll add that to the list of things that we research. Who makes that decision? Is that something we need to talk to them in DC? Yeah.
Actually, when I brought a subject up about moving that, using it for whatever, moving it, actually remembered and taught. So
It's a good first step.
that maybe, because they had some ideas for it, but maybe they
Right.
didn't want to use it.
Because, yeah, if we went over their head and they hated the idea, then we'd be stuck. So having their support, yeah. So we'll add that to our list of questions. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
I agree that is something that is a good conversation that we can have, but I agree with you too. In recent conversations we've had with the Navy, it does go to a next level, so that's usually where it takes a little longer, but we will have those conversations.
Yeah, if it were up to the local CO, it probably would have been done, a long time ago. So, but we'll keep it in the back of our mind. Any other council people would like to speak again? Have any more questions? Is there anything we should have asked and didn't? Is there anything staff
Did we
thinks we
help?
should know? Did we make it worse?
Well, I guess that's our question for you. And like Sabrina said, you know, if there is any other information you would like to have for this discussion, if you want us to go out and do a survey or you know, we have a good list. I took notes too. And,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, we'll have as much available as possible for you when we come back in November. Just want to get an indication that that is what you want us to do. Come back to the November 17th,
19th.
meeting.
November 19th?
And I think a follow-up to that question would also be, regardless of where we're at in this list of things to do or where we're at, does it make sense to come back then just as an update, even if we don't have the ability to do an action at that time? Or a workshop or what have you?
Serena sees me looking at her. What?
I think we're thinking the same thing,
Okay.
that it sounds like at this point that we're at doing another update in November potentially with what we've learned, and there's really not an action because you have told us today that what council is looking for is us to do this additional research, get more information, and start this sort of more detailed plan of how we're going to approach that and give you that update.
Is there a timeline for establishing a B&O tax or, you know, deciding to, I mean, when would we start that process? When would you need a motion?
So what we
cetera.
did start is our communications officer, Maggie Aguilar, is going through, and she is actually working with Dana and David Goldman, so that what we can do is establish a process where we go out to the business owners and educate them. One of the things she's looking at is a tool that would allow them to answer questions as we go, like some of those new online formats do, so that we're getting the feedback as the presentation is done, and people could also watch later and give that feedback. We're doing it as an online forum because we know that for business owners, it's hard for them to necessarily go at a certain time to a certain meeting. So that is in process, and we can give you an update on that timeline as well as some of these other steps. So that's what we'll do, is work towards workshop and giving you an update on what we're doing.
All right, thank
Also,
you.
just mention again, you
course.
do have an advisory commission specifically for the marina. You know, if there's information you'd like to have from them, if you'd like to have a joint meeting, if you'd like to hear comments from them or whatever, input or information that would be helpful to you.
I personally would absolutely think that we should have a joint meeting and get that scheduled so we can have a conversation. Does anybody else on council support that?
We
Yeah.
all need to be tugging on the same end of the rope.
That's a great analogy. Okay, so if staff feels like they have enough to move forward, all right.
Take care of his mud.
Thank you.
Always, thank you. Thank you for your patience. Okay, moving on to our monthly departments report. Yeah, we're starting, okay. I'm struggling with the new order of, it's like, it's been reversed. Yeah, we do the last
I
stuff
just
at
did
the
the same
beginning.
thing. I was like, wait, where am I?
Yeah, all good. So our city administrator, Sabrina Combs, will provide our monthly report from our various departments.
So I try to keep this short and sweet for you because our staff has done a great job of creating some reports for you with the information. So, well, that's what I've heard, so I'm excited. Oh, I clicked the wrong button. Let's see if it's going. Did you turn it off and I just, oh, you're right. I see it now. Oh. No. I was thinking, oh, there it goes. Okay. So some of the key projects that we highlight in the report are the new grant report, which I'm going to talk about in a little more detail. We've been working on budget as a staff. There's just a lot of work that's been going on around that. We've been doing the marina open houses that you just heard about. Staff and Development Services have been working on the comp plan. We've also been doing some meetings with Island County that some of you have been involved in, as well as preparing for our annual audit and looking at some of that information. And then we've had a ton of community events and working with our community partners, and it's been awesome to see some of you as council out there with us on staff and just sharing in some of the events that have been going on. And then, of course, some ongoing construction projects. So what I wanted to first talk about is that we're revising the grant application process a bit. We've realized from feedback from some of our directors that The current process sometimes prevents us from being able to apply because there's no impact to a budgetary item. It's something that's just adding funds or adding a program. But when we sometimes have to bring items to council, it's delaying us being able to apply on time. So what we want to do is just make that a little more flexible. We would still bring the contracts forward to council. And then this new item in the packet, in the report, would show you exactly what's going on with grants. So you'd have a regular monthly update on what we're looking at, what we're applying for, maybe grants we didn't get and why, and how we're working to address that in the future. So part of this will be updating our procurement policy. It turns out in the procurement policy, there's one minor line item in the Visio that talks about all grants have to be approved through council. And since our central services procurement person, Sandra Place, has been working through editing that with you guys anyway, because she had some comments that she received from council a couple months ago, she will be also adding this change so that it's just all consistent. So this is the new grant update that you saw in the report. It's very detailed. Wendy did a great job of making it very clear as to what's going on, and you'll start seeing that on a monthly basis as well. And then here are some of our community partnerships and events, just a little bit of what's been going on. We had some great time back in September with the students welcoming them back to school. We also did the Walk to School Day. Councilmember Stuckey joined us when we did that. It was really fun because it tied in with our wellness event. And then we had Coffee with a Cop, which was another fun event. We had several members of the community, some electeds. And then recently, this last week, we had an event at Habitat when they opened up their new facility and did a grand reopening. And then I also went to the emergency fair that happened this last weekend, and that was a lot of fun. Tons of great resources. I really, really loved what our fire department did. I'm just going to own this. They showed the fluid levels in the body when you have an incident using IV bags and showing the difference of where that impacts you in an emergency event. So it was a really helpful way of connecting you to understanding emergency events and how that affects you. And then we have some construction projects that you know have been going on, Southeast Regatta, and then Northeast 7th. And Maggie is working very closely with the Public Works Department on the Northeast 7th Avenue. The Chamber of Commerce has gone out and done some videos with them. So we're really working with Greenhouse and some of the business community there. So, and of course, can't have this report without mentioning the Angel is installed. And just as a little footnote, Brian and I are enjoying this. We can see it from my office. So it's always forever in the view. And so sometimes it's really cool because we can actually see a nice reflection with the sun going down over the water. So there was a great event for that and some fun activities that the community had around that. So any questions?
Thank you. Councilor Wiesner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Sabrina, I noticed in the report that you guys are working with an architect on ADU designs, and I love that idea.
Yes.
I love that idea of being proactive. You know, again, that was a long time coming, that ordinance, and of course, since we've enacted it, we haven't seen the flood that we we're hoping for. But what I want to do is I want to make sure in those conversations with that architect and Mr. Cool, is something you and I can probably spend some more time talking about. That we look at park models. We have yet to develop a prefabbed ADU ordinance in this community, and the reality is, if we really want ADUs to take place, we have to look at ease, right? Hiring a contractor to build a 400 square foot home is almost impossible, and if they're going to build it for you, they're going to build it for you for $500 a square foot. Whereas you can buy a factory done park model for $80,000, $90,000. It rolls in, places on the property, ease of installation, ease of cost. I think we should be looking at San Juan County's park model ordinance. I think they've addressed a lot of the concerns would have about removing of axles, hardline connections to sewers, so that it's not a temporary installation. But I think that's going to continue to be the future. We're seeing, of course, King County ADUs is almost all the redevelopment. Almost every house that is a fixer is being purchased and an ADU added to the property. It's incredible. I think if you look at ADU permits in King County, they're up like 700%. So we're a microcosm of that. It's eventually going to roll down here. And I think we need to be prepared for when we do get people in wanting to buy a prefabbed park model and moving it on the site. Right now, of course, we allow it if it's a HUD-coated manufactured home, but the reality is that's not what those guys are built to. So we've got to look at that in our codes, and I think we need to be proactive there. And obviously, this discussion you're having with the architect, I don't want them to be focused totally on, designs for site built. I think we need to bring in that conversation of what if a tiny home was coming in that's not site built, which we don't have a provision for right now.
And I appreciate Development Services Director Cool working with us on that. You had brought it up in our meeting with Island County, and I literally came back to the office and said, David, is this something we could look at? And then I was talking with Mayor Pro Tem, and I said, yeah, it might be easier if people had like an easier way to understand this, because I think these sound great in principle, and you're right, we didn't have people, coming in droves. So how do we meet the community where they are so they can understand what's required around that? So I know they're starting that work, and I really appreciate it, and we appreciate your feedback on that.
Yeah, not wait for someone to come to us and ask if it's okay, but say, hey, there's an opportunity here that you might not
Exactly.
be aware of. Any other council questions for our city administrator? Councilor Hoffmeyer doesn't have his hand up. Okay. I had a question, I forgot it, so.
You know where to find me.
All right, so we've been here for almost 2 hours, so I think we will take a brief recess. Do you want like 5 minutes or 10 minutes? Is 5 minutes too little and 10 minutes too much? 8 minutes? Let's reconvene at 2:55. 7 minutes, thank you. It is 2:56, almost 2:57, and we are going to reconvene after a brief recess. We covered our monthly department report with our city administrator, Sabrina Combs, and next up, we have updates for our advisory boards and commissions. And Sabrina will review potential updates to the process for selection of board and commission members. Take it away.
There it is. Okay. Thank you, Tim. So we had a request several weeks ago from council regarding revising the application process for our advisory boards. So this is the presentation to go through that. Really, we just documented some of the information that we came up with, but this is an opportunity for you to discuss with us how you want to move forward with this. So our current process is that we have an online application on our website that individuals who want to serve on an advisory board can submit, and then it's reviewed for eligibility because some of the boards do have requirements around them. And then if a vacancy exists, the staff liaison contacts the applicant to discuss the interest for the position and talk that through with them. Then the staff recommendation is presented to the mayor, and then we bring it to you at council for confirmation. So with that in mind, currently the applications we received, because this question came up when we first started talking about this, in the past 12 months, these are the stats for the applications that we've received. So I'll just give you a minute to look at that. One thing that you should be aware of is that some individuals do submit an application for multiple positions because they're just looking to serve at the city, and so they click all the ones that they are interested in. And then there is a higher number for the Police Community Advisory Board because that was restarted this year in 2024. So we did a lot of campaigning. The police department spoke to some people. They had recently had a community academy, and so there was a lot of interest in that. Okay. So some recommended changes. Oops, it's not clicking. There it goes. Some recommended changes are that we are looking at adding the ex officio, which is one of you, to review the applications when they're received. Our online website tool allows us to select who receives those applications. So what that would mean is as soon as the person submits it, an email would go out to you. It would show the filled out application. You'd see it as soon as we do in the executive staff. When we receive that, then we'd all have a chance to look at it. Then what we're recommending is that the interviews are done at the advisory boards. Advisory boards had talked about that when we did the external review last year. We started out with the initial revisions that we did for external only and then moving towards internal this year. But in this conversation that you brought up, we thought maybe this is something that we should bring back to the table in the discussions that I've had with council. So what they would do is do the interviews at the meetings, and we thought, again, maybe this is the role of the ex officio that they might take on to do.
Bless you.
So then additional application questions are also something that we could add. Some of the items that we thought of adding are things like adding a checkbox to confirm that they've looked at the calendar and they know in fact that they can attend all of the meetings that are scheduled for that advisory board. Some of the boards don't meet regularly. Sometimes they meet as called, but some of them do have a regular schedule, and the time of day or other things are factors to them serving on that board. How many advisory board meetings have you attended in the last 6 months? That shows whether they've been engaged in the process of what this board is working on. What's the most important topic or project you feel the board is considering? Again, talking about maybe what their specific interest is in that board so that we understand why they want to get involved. Their professional or volunteer activities, how does your background serve with the objectives of the board, and then what do you feel a board or commissioner's role is so that we have a better understanding of how they want to serve in that capacity. So then with that, we have the expiring terms and resignations that we wanted to highlight as part of this discussion. Each October, that's on hold this year because we're having this discussion, but each October we're going to go through and do a process where we reach out to those individuals, or we do the process of finding out who are expiring with their terms. We would include the ex officio would then notify the council of any resignations we receive. Since the applications are available online for individuals to submit and serve on the board, again, that can be done at any time. We try to keep within the last 6 months so that we pull those as the most recent we go out to and say, hey, you applied in recently, there's an opening on this board, are you still interested in serving? The communications officer will also promote for that 30-day period when we're looking to add somebody to a board. We were going to do it after we advise council, but sometimes those dates don't line up, so we're going to do it with the vacancy for that 30-day period. And then during the 30-day period, the mayor will update council on the number of vacancies and applications received during mayor's comments. So typically right now, you see that we have vacancies. What we'll add is a layer of telling you how many applications have been received so that we can all help in getting the word out about boards that we need to fill. There it goes. So some additional considerations as we were going through this process, Councilmember Stuckey contacted and said, LTAC, we need to get somebody on LTAC and they have to fit a certain parameter. Some of your boards or commissions may fall into that. And so we do want to make awareness that is this change something you want to do for specific advisory boards? Is it for all? Do we want to think about those boards or commissions that might have those requirements where there are certain roles that we're looking to fill? And then we also added just a note about staff and legal counsel to explore opportunities to combine boards. We've had this conversation on and off with different boards and committees. Maybe there's opportunities in the future to look at combining them, and we're happy to do that exercise for you. So next step is which boards, did I skip one? Oh, sorry. Next step is which boards do you want to include in the process and the timeline that it'll take to make those changes through the process. So I'm going to leave it with that. And then she has the web links if we need to click and look at some of the content we talked about. So I'm now going to turn it over to you.
Council, are there questions, comments? Councilor Wiesner?
Yeah, there's several things I like about this. First off, by getting the ex officio involved, I mean, we take a little more ownership of helping, right? Because the reality is, for a long time, it's kind of been a council hands-off kind of thing. And it's not that we've been told it's hands-off. It's just, out of sight, out of mind, right? By getting those applications in front of one of us, right, we get a little more involved, and I think we can help, with filling some of these roles. Obviously, I like the idea that we're going to work smarter, not harder here, right? I mean, let's face it, some of the commission positions have been revolving doors, right? And we need to own that, right? We made those selections. Granted, they volunteered, but the reality is we allowed ourselves just to put a warm body in the seat, right? And not really the best body in the seat, right? And these commissions are important to us, right? They do a lot of the heavy lifting for council, and we do rely upon them to be informed in that heavy lifting. And when they come forward with a recommendation, and it's something the council can't support, that's a struggle for us, right? And having the right people on the board, I think we would find less and less in that. So yeah, I think these are all positive moves in the right direction. I think it's going to enable us to get better quality candidates. We may have some positions open longer to go through this process, but then when we start feeding people into these positions, they can actually serve out an entire term, right? I think that's going to offset that. I would guess I would maybe add one thing to it, and that is a meeting with a department head or the ex officio or something. I don't know that we do a real good job of priming the candidates once they're selected. At least I've heard that from a couple of candidates, where they're just kind of basically, okay, here's your seat, here's your name tag, and show up to the meeting and you'll figure it out. Again, I think for their sake, the more engaged we can get them early on when they first come on, the better success we have of them being a successful staying candidate. I know we had a couple of rotations on the planning commission, for example, where the people just said, I was in way over my head. I had no clue what they were talking about, right? Well, again, that's on us. If we set them down at a meeting where they weren't prepared for that meeting and weren't prepared for what was coming at them, we need to own that. And so, you know, maybe, you know, and like I said, I don't know if that's the department head, I don't know if that's ex officio, but, you know, certainly, you know, I think we owe it to them if they're going to step forth and volunteer, that we spend the time to give them the tools so that they don't feel like they're inadequate during those initial first meetings. It's a big task, especially when coming onto a board with several people who've already been there for a while, and now you're the one person, you know, who doesn't understand any of the acronyms, and you're sitting with a bunch of people who just keep spitting them out, and it becomes pretty intimidating. So, but great job on looking at this. I appreciate you hearing our concerns about it. It is an important function of the city. It is an important part of community involvement, right? Having these boards and having people with outside ideas coming on these boards. And I just think, you know, up until now, we've just really not put as much effort into it as we can. And the results, of course, kind of equal sometimes, right? I think we had to, you know, go against, I think, a planning commission recommendation one time, and that just almost killed me. It's like, you know, my gosh, these people, they spent all this time, they volunteered their time, they analyzed this, and, you know, came to what I felt to be the wrong decision. You know, and I think if we work with these committees, we're going to find less and less of that, because the information coming back is going to be more informed, and it's, you know, we're going to have a lot more faith, I think, in what they're doing, understanding that they've been through some sort of a vetting process. This is something they're passionate about, something they've sat down and had some understanding about, and we went through a vetting process to make sure we're putting the right person in the seat, not just a person. So thank you.
Sure thing.
Counselor Stuckey.
Yeah, we've certainly seen the impact of boards and what they have in the last couple of years. I could say firsthand and secondhand, it's typically been, we have an opening, we have 3 openings, 1 person applied, you're on. There's no interview, there's no conversation. I always use Carrie's example that she found out she was on because she saw it on a consent agenda. That is the only correspondence that she got. Now, that being said, that was years ago.
Okay, I was going to say.
No, that was years ago. I'm not trying to make it sound, I'm not trying to make it sound like
this.
this was 6 months
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
That was years ago. So we've already done better than we did. We just need to get a little bit better. So I've got some nitty gritty thoughts, but ultimately, if you just put through as is, I'm fine. So I'm not passionate about this, but a couple thoughts on questions.
Okay.
How many meetings you've attended? I would probably put how many meetings have you attended or watched. I mean, let's be honest. A lot of times, and a lot of times
I think
people
we
aren't
think
coming-
of it generically, but I appreciate
exactly.
that. That's a great edit.
The volunteer experience in business. There was a question about that, and then also your background. I think that could just be one question.
Okay.
I mean, if you're going to ask, let's see here. The question, it was list your professional volunteer activities and how they relate, and how does your background best serve the objectives. I feel like that should naturally be the same answer. Will you be able to make it to X amount of meetings and to commit to so many years? Now, I have no data, so correct if I'm wrong. I would imagine a lot of these commissions have a term, which I honestly don't think a lot of people realize when they apply that there's a term. And most of them probably do not fulfill that term. I'm sure there are some. We have some people on commissions that have been there 5-6 years, but a lot of times it's there for 2 years, gone. There for a year, gone. So ask if they can commit to a certain amount of time, realizing that obviously it's not binding. There was talk about voting that person in on a board level. The only issue I have with that is having served on an awful lot of volunteer boards, it's hard to say no. And so a lot of times you'll say, we have 3 openings, 1 person who applied. Well, we don't want to be the bad guys, so we'll just vote them in. I mean, we know that happens. So I like more the idea of it being approved more on a staff level, or even an ex officio with combined with staff. With the ex officio, we also have to make sure if we're going to put more of this on that person, we also have to make sure we have a good commitment from them too. I mean, if we sign up for a board or commission and there's 12 meetings and we make 6 of them, it might be a little hard if we're the ones that are supposed to report to council, this person resigned or that person. I mean, still could still do it, but if you're going to put more on us, we need to make sure we're super active.
So, council member, sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
when you're saying that, are you thinking then that staff would then contact you and say, we've received, let's say, 3 applications for position X. We're going to sit down with you and go through those applications and decide who we want to.
Yeah, I would say, and if staff and the ex officio want to sit down there with an interview, they certainly can. If they just want to give it to the ex officio for a nod, but I think having that interview process does 2 things. 1, it helps vet, but 2, it helps build value. Okay. I mean, how much value do you feel if you're just on? I mean, there should be a little bit of a competitiveness to it. And if we have 3 openings, one person applies and that's not the right person, they should not be on there. And I don't think it's appropriate to say, put it in front of a board of volunteers and say, now you guys got to be the bad guys. I mean, it needs to be us as a city. I also like the idea of having an individual refer you on there, only because maybe I have someone who I think is a perfect spot for the Marine Advisory Commission.
Yeah.
And so I refer them, mayor points them, they go through that. But maybe the ex officio wants to call me and go, why do you think that person is? You know, because a lot of these boards are filled by people we refer. And lastly, you asked, should it apply to all of the boards or not? At a glance, I would say the 2, maybe that should be outliers, LTAC, and that's because, again, like when it comes to collectors, you have to work at a hotel. That's an extremely, extremely small applicant pool. And I also think, isn't the Law Enforcement Firefighter Disability Board, isn't that very specific with their requirements as well?
I believe it is. We're going to look real quick, but I believe.
It is.
I was looking on the website, and it seemed like one person had to be a doctor.
Yeah, I believe you have to have served in that position. Usually so that's what we were saying is, do you want us to come back with a list of, those that might not
I
fit in
would.
that?
And the last thing I would have, because I want to make sure people know what they're applying, because I take my time on the planning commission. A lot of people get on there thinking it's one thing, find out it's way over their heads. But part of that's on us. Like when I look at the planning commission and I look at the overview, there's 2 sentences. Now I should watch a meeting and I should do my research, admittedly. But if I'm just going at a quick glance at curiosity, I have 2 sentences. So all of these, I think we could update and do a much better job of, this is what we do, here are the expectations. And you hope you watch a meeting after that, but 2 sentences is not enough to say what the planning commission does.
So we can work on expanding that, but just so you know, the director does meet with them beforehand to have a conversation about.
When did that, I mean, that's a change from years. Did that change the last year or 2? I mean, I'm not looking for an exact date, but it's fairly recent, or?
It's been at least over a year from when we were doing the update.
Okay.
So yeah, and they sit down and they have a conversation about, and I believe even
Sure.
the senior administrative assistant joins that meeting.
And
so
I-
they
and-
have a detailed conversation.
And I think I got that impression when I talked to staff about a recent planning commission appointment. So it is getting better, and I think this is the final step of having it be really good. So I like it. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor Stuckey. Councillor Arms, do you have anything to add? Councillor Hoffmeyer? Is Shane still on the line? I don't see it. Okay. All right. At some point, we lost Councillor Hoffmeyer. Sabrina, are you able to put the slides that you had weren't in the
Tim has them.
packet? Well, and if they were, I weren't able to find them. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, not that one.
We'll get to
That's
that
next.
one.
You're jumping ahead, Tim.
I mean, yeah, well, I'd be happy to provide my specific thoughts on, each commission, but in general, the list of, thank you, yeah, just the list of the commissions I had in front of me. Thank you. Oh, thank you. That's everybody. All right. In general, what we don't want to make this cumbersome and time-consuming. I mean, the last thing department heads need is to have another meeting or another interview or et cetera. So we want to be able to get quality applicants who know what they're getting into, and we can definitely do a much better job of preparing people and saying, this is what it would be like to serve on this commission. This is approximately how many hours you're going to be expected to serve for approximately number of meetings. Because for us to put someone in a position that they're not prepared for isn't really fair. So that's on us. And we want to find a balance between thoroughly vetting a person without making it too cumbersome for staff. That I'm concerned that every step we add just takes up more staff time. So I'm assuming that you are keeping all of that in mind when you give us your recommendations. You wouldn't present something that's unrealistic for us to expect, I would hope.
Yeah, the conversation with the staff liaison, some of those we know are already happening with the revisions we did last year for the external boards. So because of that, we could see that as an easier fit. Adding the ex officio through the website form and giving them an opportunity is something simple because our website tool is just adding a name. So we loved that because that's a simple fix. I think adding the additional questions to vet and look through is just an added piece of, adding those lines of information. So that's how we sort of approach that. We tried to find that balance of giving council what they were looking for and addressing their requirements so that we were also understanding more of that individual's need to serve or why they want to serve.
Perfect. And I thought Councilor Stuckey's recommendation of adding the who referred you question to the application is brilliant. Yeah, I think what you've come up with is reasonable. I'm not sure if we need an ex officio on every single board or commission.
Yeah, because like the investment committee, there's 2 council members.
Yeah.
So someone who's,
So we can work with you and decide that, or we can include both and then you guys can I think that's very flexible. That's why we like our web tool because it gives us some flexibility in that so that you could both have it and nobody feels left out of that process.
Absolutely, yeah. And some, like you said, some of the commissions are real specific on membership and some are just open to whoever might want to do it. So we can certainly go through the list in a little more detail at another time, but I appreciate the thought that you've put into what you've presented. Do you need any direction from us?
The only thing that Mikhail just brought up, which is a good point, is it sounds like what we're moving to, per Councilmember Stuckey's recommendation, is instead of having the board do the interview, you are requesting that instead we have the ex officio do the interview as part of the process. We just want to be clear that we're hearing the request right.
Have an
the
ex officio
change,
meet and a staff member meet with them.
I mean, I'm open to, somebody needs to meet with them, whether that be a staff member or the argument is that's too much extra work, or the ex officio. I don't have a firm passion on that. I just think having them just come before the committee and having that committee be the body, it's a little tricky. I want a little more objectivity, and I want people to feel okay to say no if it's not right. And I think that'd be harder in a volunteer environment. So either the staff member or, the ex officio, or, they're mayoral appointments. The mayor could also be one. So.
Okay, that's fair. We could do it as a designee kind of thing.
Yeah, I think in the many years ago, I think every single appointment met one-on-one with the mayor before.
They're his appointments, so.
Right. Okay, so you feel like
Sounds good. Thank
you
you.
got what you need from us? Thank you. And continuing the discussion, we've got our salary commission discussion, and we'll have Sabrina review the current resolution in place for the salary commission, including the rules and regulations of the revised Code of Washington governing salary commissions. And is our city attorney Hillary Evans on the line? Yep, I see her. Okay. And she'll be there on the line to answer our questions as needed.
So I'm here. Oh, hi, Hillary.
Hi, Hillary.
I'm just going to give a quick overview. Really, this was for you as a council to talk about, so I just pulled some documents for you, gave you some background. So, as a council, I know this has been a topic. What I wanted to do is just provide the background. I also talked with Hillary so that we made sure that she could answer some of your questions. So I'm just going to walk through the slides. It's just some of the background. And I didn't mean to overload you in paperwork, but I think the historical reference was helpful for what's been going on. And I think sometimes it's nice to have that data. So I just wanted to give that to you. So with the Salary Commission, oops. Would help if I click the right button. So the Salary Commission has been in effect since June 30th of 2005, according to the records that I found. And oops. It's not clicking. I think it's mad at me. Thank you. So they meet once per year or as called, and that's just because of the way the Salary Commission works. They are also one of the commissions that they're an internal, which we haven't done the bylaw review and ordinance update. So just so that you're aware, we haven't done that review because that was the group that we were working towards this year. So that is what we will be doing with them. They have 5 commissioners. Currently, there's 1 vacancy, and there is 1 staff liaison, which is the Human Resources Director. Next slide, please. So the background is in Washington State. Elected officials can either establish their own salaries and wait for them to become effective or use a salary commission. And then there's explanation of the salary commission, which I put in the agenda packet. Next slide. So RCW, this explains all the detail around that, which I put in your packet. Next slide. And then our municipal code goes into this as well. And it's very similar to what's in the state. So With that, I just want to open it up for whatever discussion you might want to have around that, and Hillary is available to answer questions.
I also want to defer to Councilman Wiesner over there, but, so, I mean, this was kind of something I asked for. I mean, let's be honest, this last process was pretty controversial. I am not, for one instance, I want to be clear, I am not implying the mayor fixed it or anything like that. I want to be clear about that. But I can understand why people would have that observation. Hey, I'm appointing people who approve my salary. Just not the individuals on there, but just in general. I have zero issue with having a salary commission. I have zero issue with them approving council's salary. I do not want to be approving my salary directly, indirectly, or otherwise. However, while it's unusual, according to Hillary, it is not against any codes or laws for the council to approve the mayor's salary. So this kind of came from me as how can we still maintain a salary commission, and how can we have it so there's not any chance of even the optics of someone directly or indirectly approving their own salary. And I think based on the information I have, that's probably one of the more ethical ways to do it. So that's kind of what I'm in favor of, but I certainly wanted this as a discussion item for us to kind of air our thoughts on the process. So that's what I have.
Thank you, Councillor Stuckey. Councillor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Well, you know, I think the simplest solution to this is to actually follow the rules that we set up when we set the Fowler Salary Commission back in 2005. And I think the rule, and I'm not going to say it's a rule, this was an opinion from Phil Bile, the city attorney in 2005. And I think it's quite frankly the step we missed. You will want to invite public comment and input, which means that you will want to hold one or more public meetings on the issue involved. Okay, I'm going to read that again. You will want to invite public comment and input, which means you will want to hold one or more public meetings, public hearings on the issues involved. Now, we can certainly say that the Salary Commission, oh, well, they posted on the website that there was going to be a meeting. We really didn't say anything in the minutes that we were going to be discussing the mayor's salary, other than we were going to be reading a letter from the mayor. If we want to call that a public comment or a public hearing, it wasn't, right? And then, Phil was very careful with his words there. You will want to hold one or more, okay? You will want to invite public input, right? That's the part we skipped, right? By the time we found out about it and the public found out about it, it was done, right? And I think this goes back to the rules of procedure for the organization. It looks as though maybe they just adopted the rules of procedure of council, that they really don't have rules of procedure. Because what I'd like to think is that rules of procedure, that if there's a recommendation for a major change, which is what it was. We changed from a part-time to a full-time mayor, that recommendation come out publicly, 30 days prior to action, right? Because the reality is the current way we're doing it, right? We come out and we tell everybody 30 days after it's happened, and you have 30 days to react. The reality is the public should have been notified that this was a subject of discussion, that this was the intended action that the Salary Commission was going to take. And then the Salary Commission should have invited the public comment. And this is all hindsight, and I'm not saying, again, I'm with Brian, I'm not saying the Salary Commission did anything wrong. I appreciate them volunteering, but I don't know that we invited public comment on an action. I don't know that the public knew that action was a point of discussion. Certainly, as council, we didn't know that was happening, and I'd like to think that we're public also. So I think some of this could be addressed through rules of procedure.
So are you suggesting when we do the bylaws and the ordinance update, add this as an element? I just want to clarify the request.
Yeah. Well, again,
that's a process we still need to do. So
that's right. The rules of procedure for how the Salary Commission acts is how I think we can prevent a repeat while still utilizing the Salary Commission and the tools of the Salary Commission. Let's face it, if 30 days prior to that action, we had all been notified that action was pending. The newspaper had been notified that action was pending. If the public had been notified that action was pending, and then nobody decided to comment on it, and the action took place, it's a whole different thing than after the fact, oh, by the way, we did this, and there's nothing you can do about it, and there you go. So I think our rules of procedure is where we drop the ball at. Not so much having the salary commission, not so much having the Washington Revised Code that supports it, but so much internally as to how we took that step of inviting, where is that? Inviting the public to comment on this. We invited them to comment on it after the fact, not before the fact. And let's face it, as a council, that's something we're very conscious of. I mean, how many times have we put off making a decision because we felt as though we didn't get enough public comment? And, decision's probably not as big as that decision. So.
Okay, we will look at adding that as we're doing the revisions for the bylaws and the ordinances.
Councilor Armas, do you have anything to? No? I disagree. I think that fundamentally, the commission is set up the way it is so that it's a blind process and we are not involved because it involves our paychecks. I mean, that's the intention, that's the point, is to have us not be part of that process. We used to determine our own salaries, and while they wouldn't apply to us, but the next person that ended up in our position, it's still kind of weird to approve your own salary. So the fact that the Salary Commission solicited information from the mayor when they made that decision, and then when they considered ours, they solicited information from us, which honestly is a first for me, because the Salary Commission it's not been real active over the last however many years. But the fact that we were completely uninvolved in that process and found out afterwards, I think, to me, that's the benefit of having a salary commission. So I think that if we are members of the public, so are the salary commissioners. They're public volunteers in our community. So could we do a better job of advertising meetings and letting people know ahead of time that someone's getting together and this is what's on the agenda specifically, and this is why absolutely 100% we could do much better. But I think the process is currently set up the way it is for a reason. And at what point do we start eliciting public participation and comment in other boards and commissions? That's not a thing. The meetings are public. People can pay attention and go if they want. They can submit their opinions if they want on anything at any time, always. That's already a thing. I think the current process, it ensures that it's a blind process. I like it that way. I don't think we should be involved in the process. I don't think the council should approve the mayor's salary. I think that could get political real fast. I would prefer to be totally hands-off. So personally, I'm just one vote, but I support the current commission setup as is. Councilor Reesner.
Thank you. Well, and I the part of that I don't agree with is it should be blind to the public. I mean, that just seems kind of odd, right? It should be totally blind. I'm not saying that we would have any say over it whatsoever. All I'm saying is that we would have knowledge. That's all I'm asking for. Not say, I don't want to vote on it. I don't want to have the final say on it. The Salary Commission, I understand that. But I would like to have the knowledge, because I think the public should have the knowledge, because to say that because there are salaries, the public should be in the blind about that. And the difference between
I meant
meetings.
Us being blind.
Well,
not public,
I get it, but
specifically
by us being blind, the public's also blind, right? Because the reality is, if we don't know what's happening, how's the public going to know what's happening, right? And so by saying, council being blind, public's going to be blind too. And here's the difference in this meeting versus the other meetings that people have input on. Planning Commission meeting, it's the same date every month, same time. You can attend that Planning Commission meeting, every second Tuesday of the month, right? These meetings are special meetings, They're called. If you're not going to the website and you're not clicking on the link and you're not looking for that salary commission meeting, nobody has even an idea that it's happening, that the discussion's happening. So, you know, it's not a consistent monthly meeting. You're not going to get somebody to show up to a meeting where it says, oh, we're having a meeting of the salary commission and we may or may not discuss council and the mayor's salary, right? Versus holding a meeting and then coming out and before taking the action, putting out, this is the salary commission's intended action. The council would have no vote or say on it, but the public certainly would not be in the blind about upcoming action. That would give the public the opportunity to come in and give comment. And then the salary commission makes their decision based upon not only the facts they have in front of them, but the public comment. Right now, they make their decision and the public's cut out of that decision. I just have a problem with that.
Would it be helpful, Councilmember, if we were to add some language when we do these revisions about, I don't know, I'm just trying to think this through because they don't meet regularly, like a 30-day notice or a 2-week I mean, I don't know, because Mikhail's been doing a great job in the department report of highlighting what meetings are coming up. So maybe with that time period, it adds more of an opportunity for people to be aware of it.
Yeah, I'm
But it's kind of a
picturing-
halfway between,
Yeah,
you know,
I'm
it's-
picturing some sort of intended, notice of intended action. Salary commission on such and such a date, they plan to reconvene in 30 days. In 30 days, they intend to take action upon the mayor's salary. This is the proposed action. We're inviting public comment. Right? That's what I picture. You know, and then they reconvene their meeting and they take action. But right now, they can literally go into a meeting, right, with very little notice to the public, right? And they can take action right then and there, and it's unreversible action, and there's nothing you can do about it. But again, yeah, you know, how getting that word out in 30 days, you know, obviously we were finding difficult, right? And you know, as a citizen, how does that sound? Oh, well, we've already taken the action, and if you hurry up, you may be able to say something about it. But you got to get a whole lot of people together, and you got to get the signatures done, and you got to get right. Versus, we're about to take this action, and we would like your input. Simple as that. Council's not getting involved in it. The only thing is we're being notified of it, just like the public. Because if we don't know about it, the public's not going to know about it. So, and I don't necessarily say that we have to have a special notification. We can have included that notification that's going out to the public. We can be JQ public, right? It's not like you have to come to us and smack us upside the head. But let's face it, the public had no idea that was taking place. That's the issue, right? And let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's certainly address the issue at hand.
Counselor Stuckey.
And I want to be very careful to not beat up on the past, because the idea was there was a process, maybe we're a little hazy on it. Process was legally followed. Everything was above board, okay? As far as that, maybe not ethically, but legally. I'm looking at going forward, how can we change that? And I do understand the minefield of council approving the mayor's salary. 4 of us don't like the mayor, 3 of us do. Yeah, what does that vote look like? So I understand that. All I'm trying to accomplish, all I'm looking for is a way that nobody is directly or even has the appearance of indirectly setting their salary. And if we, tighten up the bylaws, it's still the mayor who appoints the salary commission. And you could still have 5,000 public comments saying, we don't want this. And you could still have that salary commission say, got it, given that raise anyways. So I just want to find some way, and if it's not the council, some way that people not appointed by the mayor are the ones that approve his salary. I wouldn't want people that we appoint approving our salary. Yes, I know we confirm, but we're not the one that appoint. So if there's any way to make it so there's no direct or indirect, that is what I'm looking to accomplish. I suggested council because it was a logical step, but I'm open to other options.
Thank you, Counselor Stuckey. Yeah, in my opinion, that because council confirms the mayor's appointment, that step is already built into the process. If any of us has a problem with someone on the commission, then we could vote negatively. I'm just, in my head, I'm maybe Hillary has some ideas, but in a strong mayor city, which is what we have, I don't think there's any way to get around the fact that the mayor makes the appointments. I'm not sure that's a thing.
Yeah, I was gonna jump in here. So I've done quite a bit of research on this to try and find any other model, but what you'll find is that your ordinance is almost verbatim the same as every other ordinance in the state, including counties. And the way that the commission is appointed is exactly the same pretty much across the board. And that's with mayoral appointment, with the council's ability to reject that appointee. So I think, you know, I've heard that there may be some issues with the people currently on the board. That time has passed, and I think the lesson learned here is you need to be really critical of anyone that the mayor may present on one of these boards or commissions, and really scrutinize them at the time of the appointment, because they're, as you said, you can't really remove them once they're appointed. And Mayor Pro Tem is correct in that it's in order for neither the council nor the mayor to have control over their own salaries, it's sort of a double blind, right? One has to appoint and one can reject, and it's like every other governmental redundancy. It's so that the mayor couldn't appoint a whole bunch of cronies to that commission to then maximize his own salary in this instance. But also, if the council appoints, we don't want them appointing their cronies to maximize their own salaries. And I suppose the council and the mayor could get together and all agree on a group of people that would maximize their salaries, but you know, there's nothing to be done about that. This model is what the RCW proposes. This model is what every other city and county in the state that uses this model utilizes. Now, the difference is in a strong council, then the council universally sets the city manager's salary, and that's the difference. So I wouldn't worry about the optics or the politics in the way that the ordinance is written and the procedure for appointing people to the board. If in application it's not working, I don't think it's a problem with the procedure as written. I think it would be highly unusual for a council to set a mayor's salary when it's a strong mayor city. But like I said, I don't think it's prohibited by law. And the other thing that I wanted to say is if we're concerned with the noticing, you know, I want to underline the fact that I heard that it's problematic that nobody knew this was happening. I would underscore what Mayor Pro Tem said, which is some of that is sort of by design, right? You as council members are intentionally kept in the dark. You know, Sabrina's not up here screaming, your salaries are going to be reviewed tomorrow. Are you so excited? Because that's the purpose of the system, right? Is that you are not being alerted. But if you have a problem with the public notice, or the content of the agenda, that is something that staff can work on. For instance, if you want an agenda to be highly specific, you could recommend that or put that into rules of procedure where they have to identify potential action items as underlined and bolded in their agenda, much like yours is written. You know, a lot of councils or a lot of boards and commissions don't have such formal agendas as a council would. City or town council would. So you could just put in their rules of procedure that anything that is going to be up for a vote would be underlined and bolded or highlighted or whatever, identified in the agenda as such. You know, it's something under Robert's rules that could be modified in the moment. You could always vote on something last minute if the commission wanted to, but at least then you'd have that ground rule for them to follow. You could also specify, I mean, I think that this commission gets, you know, exactly what everyone gets under the OPMA. Also, I should say, backing up, salary commissions are so unique because they only ever meet when they're considering your salary, right? It's not like the planning commission who's going to talk about ADUs one day and flower pots the next. They're always and only meeting to consider your salaries and to likely take action on it, which is why they very infrequently meet. They're only required, I think, to meet once a year. So you have to assume that if they're going to meet, it's going to be something that is going to concern either you or the mayor or both, and which likely does concern the public. So what you could do is you could ask them to adopt more stringent noticing than required by the OPMA. You could change the number of days or the form of notice. If you really wanted to devote resources to it, you could have an email blast go out to the public, minus the council and mayor maybe, that indicates that they've set their annual meeting or something. So I think it's really about the form and content of notice that's bothering you at this point. And that's, I think, where you can tinker, especially since their rules of procedure are being modified and amended. They're doing everything correctly and appropriately and legally, and they're doing everything that every other city and town do, and they're doing it in the same fashion. But if you have a hypersensitivity to this, there's no reason why you couldn't make more notice or change the format of the agenda or something like that. I think those would be very easy changes.
Thank you, Hillary, for that information. I think that since they're required to meet once a year, and we know that they meet once a year, that maybe it would make sense to have them meet about the same time every year, so that we all know that that's happening, as opposed to, I mean, yeah, I'm not sure how that is currently initiated, so maybe establish a set date. You meet once a year in February or whatever. I think that that would make a lot of sense. I don't think that it would require any kind of a change to our procedure to provide more public notice. And I'm not sure, yeah, I mean, we could do a better job of publicizing the fact that the meeting is happening. But to do a specific email blast or something specific to this commission, I don't think singling out this commission makes sense. I think that whatever it is that we do should apply across the board. Like, I'm on the law enforcement officer, firefighter retirement board, and sometimes we meet, sometimes we don't. It's scheduled quarterly. If there's nothing on the agenda, we cancel it. If we have something, we'll meet. And, no member of the public has ever appeared. It's, so do we need to make sure that we've got that on the city website 30 days ahead of time? Do we have a mechanism for because we don't advertise any other meetings other than just publishing the notice. So if we're going to go above and beyond and do something extra, then that just needs to be the way that we do it.
So one thing I can recommend, I'm always concerned about making sure that I see the Planning Commission agenda. And on our current website tool, you can actually go into the tool and sign up as a community member for alerts when meeting notices are sent.
Perfect.
So when the staff person creates that agenda, it automatically sends you an email. I get one for the Lodging Tax Advisory Board too, because I'm always curious what applications were submitted. Okay. Yeah, and so so all of these things are another tool that we can recommend or share more of for the community to be aware of, that that's a resource that you have, so that when it is something infrequent like that, as soon as somebody creates that agenda, it whoosh goes out into the system and says, there's an agenda waiting, and it gives them something in their mailbox.
Thank you. I think that's, yeah, I don't think anyone is suggesting that we leave out the public. It's just we have a system for noticing publishing meetings, and that should apply to all of the meetings. I don't think the Salary Commission should be special in that regard. Councilor Arms, did you? Okay, I saw you move your microphone, so I'll make sure you weren't waiting to speak. Go ahead, Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you. I just want to point out the reason this commission is different, and we do have to look at it differently. And, Hillary pointed out a very good point about action items, right? About a lot of the commissions, we don't put action items in our agenda, right? And I'm going to go back and say, I think, again, all this can be fixed through internal rules of procedure within the commission. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but the reason we do have to look at this commission different, this is the only all-volunteer commission in the city whose ruling is final. Every other volunteer commission made up of volunteer community members make recommendations to this body. This commission is not making recommendations, they're making final rulings that affect financial concerns of the city, and the people should be involved in that process, not us, but the people. The people should properly be noted when an action item is going to occur. The agenda item for this thing we're discussing, and I'm not trying to beat the past, but I'm trying to learn from the past, right? That's what we all need to do. That noted no action item. It wasn't noted as an action item, and yet an action item was taken. It was a final decision made by a volunteer commission, right? And that is different than any other commission we've got. And we do have to be conscious of the obligation we have to the citizens of Oak Harbor when we're dealing with their money and things, related to that, right? I mean, the buck stops here, except for this. The buck stops with the salary commission, right? But at the same time, doesn't still the buck stop here, right? As far as making sure we're doing a good job as council to involve citizens in as much public input as we possibly can. And so that's my 2 cents. I think it can be fixed simply through internal rules within the commission, and we need to come up with rules that make sure that we don't have an issue where the public felt they were left out of a decision.
So we're taking really good notes, and we will look at those, look at both the ordinance and the bylaws, like we've been doing for the external groups, and make those revisions, and then bring those back to you. We'll also take them back to the commission.
Thank you. Excellent points, Councilor Wiesner. Is there anyone else that would like to chime in before we move on? Staff feels like they have what they need from us. Okay.
Thanks for your time on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, next up, Development Services, our flood damage prevention. And our Development Services Director, David Kuhl, you're going to introduce whoever's going to present this item?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. David Kuhl, Development Services Director. Today we have Dennis Lefevre here, Senior Planner, and he's online to do the presentation.
It's good to see you, Dennis.
Good to see you all too. I assume you can hear me?
We can.
Okay, good. Keep my presentation fairly brief since you have a budget discussion coming up after my presentation. And I do have a PowerPoint to share, so I'll get that up and going. Briefly, what started this whole process was a community assistance visit by representatives of the Department of Ecology back in January of 2023. They looked at our code, our flood damage code, which is Chapter 1720 in Municipal Code. They looked at some of the permits that had been processed in the floodplain for new developments or redevelopment projects. And they also asked if we had any questions basically on the process and administration of flood damage regulations. And what resulted from that meeting prompted our code amendments, which we're looking at today. Actually, what was presented back in January to you folks were the recommended changes that Ecology made at that meeting. We also, at that time, began the effort to do a citywide habitat assessment, which would bring into conformance some of the project permits that were not in conformance with the National Marine Fisheries Service biological opinion and the regulations that FEMA has prepared to meet the biological opinion. So that put a wrinkle in a lot of the processing that we had done, so we prepared a citywide habitat assessment. With those changes that we made to the code from the Department of Ecology, and after review by Planning Commission and City Council as a first touch, we received word that while we incorporated Ecology's changes, that represents the statewide ordinance. It did not represent what was being proposed for meeting the biological opinion, which is a federal thing dealing with the Endangered Species Act and how we make the structures and developments within the floodplain address the requirements of the Endangered Species Act. So I looked into what document FEMA had prepared that would give us some guidance on preparing and incorporating their recommended changes so that we could address through our floodplain ordinance the Endangered Species Act. That I included as attachment 1 in your packet. It was a fairly lengthy process, which is probably why I'm bringing it back 11 months later. But anyways, the importance of it, adding that step, adding the additional ESA language into our code, it provides a linkage with the habitat assessment that we did citywide within the floodplain. It will provide consistency with the state and federal model ordinances. It will also be, the habitat assessment will also be more effective for new developments. They won't have to address a habitat assessment through their processing of developments within the floodplain. That'll already be done through the citywide assessment. And it will also put us in a position where we could look at maybe applying to FEMA's program called the Community Rating System, which means if you go through this process of looking at the requirements for this program, you check certain boxes, you go through the application, you have an opportunity as a community to say, yes, we have this in place, we have that in place, we have those regulations. We would be able to reduce the flood insurance premiums for those properties that are within the floodplain. So that's something that we are looking at. I'm not well versed in that program yet. There's a 500-page FEMA document that I want to work through, but I will present that at a subsequent Planning Commission and Council meeting and see which way we think the city should go on that process. Part of your packet today, I have included 2 attachments that address the changes made to Chapter 1720. One, I tried to show the changes that Ecology was recommending. I wanted to show the changes that the FEMA and the ESA required. Those are in green. And then staff changes were in blue. So that was attachment 2. And then, of course, the typical strike through and underline version is attachment 3. Next steps, I'll look at our SEPA that we prepared for the original draft, see if that needs to be updated. Also initiate the clock with the Department of Commerce as far as their 60-day comment on code amendments. I will also get comments back from FEMA. I heard today from the Department of Ecology that what their requirements were for their inclusions have been met, so we're good with the statewide. Who knows how long FEMA will take for their review, but we'll live with that one. I will recraft the ordinance and work with our legal team on making sure that that is in proper shape, and then come back to you folks in the first quarter of next year to do a little bit more in-depth discussion on this community rating system and see exactly what the best steps for the city would be. Subsequent to that, then we'll have public planning commission meetings. We'll also have city council proper public hearings and the adoption process following that. So with that, that concludes my update on this process, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. Cool, did you have anything you wanted to add to the item?
One thing I want to add that Dennis is still working on is the community rating system. The big deal with that is it will lower flood insurance premiums for anyone in the floodplain. So if you look at the Dillard's edition, if you look downtown where the floodplain exists, the flood insurance premiums would go down significantly based on us doing this proactive approach. And so that's the one exciting thing about putting all this together.
Fantastic, thank you.
And I intend to bring back information on that system beginning part of next year also.
Okay, any other council questions, comments? All right, we look forward to seeing you first quarter next year. Dennis, thank you for all
All
the
right,
work.
thank you.
Does anybody want to take a break before we get into our budget discussion? Take a break, power through? Julie, do you need a break? Okay. All right, moving right into finance and our biannual budget presentations. We have our Deputy City Administrator and Finance Director, David Goldman, will provide information on the 2025-26 biannual budget. Welcome, David.
Okay, good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. This presentation will be the presentation on the proposed 2025-26 biennial budget. I swear, okay. It is. So, as you recall from the last presentation we made in the September workshop, the budget document is comprised of the mayor's budget message, council priorities, budget highlights for the upcoming biennial, Oak Harbor's organizational structure, budget summary and funds, and the long-term capital plan. In the budget summary and funds, we also have the programs that we're instituting for the upcoming biennial as well. All right, so there's the mayor's message. It focuses in on city service delivery, value of staff, grant funding for capital projects, reduced utility rates, the council voted on a few months ago, and city council priorities. Next slide. So here are the upcoming meetings. Those November 5th dates are incorrect. It should be November 6th because we'll be meeting on Wednesday instead of Election Day for the first public hearings. So the first public hearing on the proposed budget and the 1% property taxes will be on November 6th, 2024. And the adoption hearing will be 2 weeks later on November 19th, 2024. And as always, the public is free to comment on this and any other item by going to our website, oakharbor.gov/public comment. So the primary changes between the September preliminary proposed and the proposed budget is the items that you see on your screen. Include 4 capital projects. For Fire Station 82, we added bond-specific interest earnings that can only be used for that project to the project amounts. For the annual street improvements, we spread out the funding between 2025 and 26 to more closely align with the actual spending. For the pickleball courts and the inclusive playground, we received notification that we did not receive the grants for 2025, so we moved those out to 2026 with the hope of receiving grants in 2 years instead of next year. We also adjusted the solid waste tipping fee expenses due to information received by Allen County. We had preliminary information at 20%. Now we receive more solid information at 22%. Also, the salary commission adopted updated council salaries. Those were included as well. We made adjustments to grant revenues based on the new information. We also made adjustments to the medical benefit premiums based on information received by our health insurance provider. We usually use a 5% increase, but the increases came in a little higher at 7 or 8%. And then after we did all this, we made all the adjustments to the interfund allocations, and we recalculated our beginning and ending fund balances. In addition, there were some changes to the decision packages and personnel requests. There was a fire overtime included in both 2025 and 2026. Oh, thank you. Let's see if I can get to that information here. Also, a fire copier lease amount was moved from 25 to 26. No change in the dollar amount, just year. Also, 0.2 FTEs were included for a communications intern in the mayor and executive administration's office. And also, the proposal is to move the part-time code enforcement officer to full-time. And next slide here. Not changing there. So, in addition, we've added programs to the budget. There's 61 programs. Details of the programs and the departments can be found starting on page 77 of the budget document. We've included preliminary performance measurements. We put TBD there. We're still working those out before we finalize those. We will need a couple of years to build history to show how these programs are doing. Additional tweaks may occur between now and the November budgets. And also, the department's budgets don't necessarily match the total for the program's budgets, because if you add up the program's budgets, they don't include the capital projects, but the capital project costs are in the department's budget. The programs are, just the operating, would be operating expenses and revenues. So there are some budget highlights that I included. It's included in the budget document itself, but also included in the staff report. In 2024, the council provided a budget amendment for recreation to add $190,000. That was partially balanced by $167,000 or so of revenues. Those additions will continue to be included in the budget for 2025 and 2026. We've looked at how things have been going throughout 2024 and have noticed that the program, those revenues and expenses, they're on track to be lower than those budgeted amounts I provided in the first bullet. Here's a chart. It's probably easier to read in your package, but this shows a pointer. So this shows 2021 through 2023 actuals, a projection for the rest of 24, and then the budget for 25 and 26. So I split up operating and departmental capital from recreation. Also, in 2021 through 24, it's in a separate fund, the senior center fund. In 25 and 26, it's in the general fund. So you'll see for the operating revenues, they're up here. There are some non-recurring operating revenues, mostly ARPA money. And for the expenses, you'll see you have personnel, operating and maintenance, interfund charges, and so on. You'll notice that in 2021, the revenues exceeded expenses. In 2022, it was the same thing. In 23, it didn't, but it was specifically designed that way because the ARPA funds were allocated towards a position that was rehired during COVID, and it was meant to be looked at over 2 years. So you'll see over the 2 years, it was a wash. We're projecting right now, and these are still preliminary projections, that there will be a deficit for 2024. And for 2025 and 26, you'll see that there's two lines. The first line is just revenues minus expenses. This line here, so when recreation was in a separate fund, Fund 129, the general fund transferred $200,000 a year to help subsidize those expenses. Now that recreation will be in the general fund, that transfer will no longer occur, but we're recording it over here just so you can see how much that transfer would have made up of this deficit. In addition, as we talked about in September, there's the new facility and infrastructure reserve for replacement charges that are now being expanded out to all departments. And for the recreation operation, that equates to about $165,000 per year. So just subtracting those two out, you can see a more apples to apples comparison of the revenues over expenses for 25 and 26. If you look at capital, you'll see that here's some money that, here's the money that we received up front from ARPA. This was for the roof phase 1 of the senior center. This is for the roof phase 2 of the senior center, and also some more money for phase 1, and also money for a generator. And then the line over here where it says expenses, those interesting. Those are basically capital expenses related to the roof. And then in 2025, there's funds budgeted for the senior center parking lot and for also that study that we're doing for recreation facilities that was provided to us by the state community grant.
David, what's that $150,000 difference in revenue?
Where?
The very top, 2024 projection, 468, 2025, 30 something, $160,000 decline in revenue. Revenue, recurring revenue.
Oh, here?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
That's because the $200,000 transfer is no longer occurring once it moves to the general fund.
Okay, so that 468 includes
Yes.
the $200,000.
Correct, which is why we put it down here to show what that would look like at a more apples to apples comparison.
Okay, so you're actually then projecting roughly a $40,000 increase in revenue when you back that out between 24 and 25, and I assume most of that's coming from program revenue?
Yeah, that's coming from the new program revenue that was provided to us. Yeah.
And I guess that just goes back to, my voucher idea, right? We've got to increase revenue, right? I mean, you got to decrease expenses at some point, and one way to increase revenue, obviously, is to increase the use of those programs, so.
Thank you, Councilmember Wiesner. I'm going to ask council to hold their questions until the end of David's presentation, just to make things easier.
Yeah, I'll try to make it more interesting.
That was good question, though.
So on the next slide, we have budget recreation requests. These were not included in the mayor's proposed budget. We grouped them into 6 different requests. They're done by priority order. We have item names like the activity guide, summer camps, sports leagues, and so on. We talked a little bit earlier about Rec and Roll. That would be connected up with the No Child Left Inside grant. We have, since we asked for decision packages and personnel requests, I put the numbers for both of those requests here in these two columns. And then this column here are the revenues that are connected up with those requests that was provided in the sheets that was provided by the department. Those personnel requests, in case you're curious, those include seasonal and part-time camp counselors, sports officials, and recreation leaders. And those personnel would be scaled to the program so that if there was less enrollment in the program, which would mean, of course, less revenue coming in, there would also be less expenses connected up with that. So if you take all the expenses that are listed here and you take the revenue that's listed here, if this comes to fruition as planned here, you can see that the difference is under $4,000. So these are not included in the proposed budget. However, now that we're passing the budget on to the city council can certainly have deliberations and decide whether or not to include these in the next iteration of the budget. So, in addition, for budget highlights, we talked about streets at the last meeting. This is just a structural deficit type deal. The purchasing power of vehicle gas has eroded significantly in the past 3 decades. Gas taxes are the main funding source for street operations and maintenance. We've been supplementing the stagnation of revenues with REIT, real estate excise tax funds. We're allowed to use real estate excise tax for limited maintenance of capital projects, and streets is one of the eligible capital projects. However, it does not look like we're going to be able to continue to only supplement it with streets in order to make sure that we have sufficient revenues to handle streets functions. And we did talk about bringing to council from revenue options next year to talk about how we can fix that issue. For water and solid waste, we were notified by our regional water provider and Island County Solid Waste that those rates will be increasing in excess of 20%. The cost to purchase water and the cost to transfer waste are pretty substantial. They don't constitute a majority of the expenses. They constitute 24% of the expenses in the water fund and 34% of the expenses in the solid waste fund. The remaining expenses in those funds are not going up nearly as much as those particular expenses are going up. But unfortunately, those increases are sufficient to, we're going to have to bring some rate adjustments to City Council to deliberate next year to go into effect either late 25 or January 2026. So just to go over the budget, this is the overall biennial budget with all the fund categories. You see the general fund is about a quarter of all the funds as far as expenses go. Internal service funds is 22%. Then you have your enterprise funds, which is all the utility funds and the marina fund. And you have some other funds as well. You have special revenue funds and capital project funds and so on. This is an overview of all funds. You can see that on the top, you have all the different recurring revenues. And you notice that pretty much stays generally even for 24 and 25. The non-recurring revenues are more volatile. Those are bond proceeds, grant proceeds, insurance recoveries. Those are harder to predict. A mix is basically miscellaneous, which is a mix of both. And then we have the interfund revenues, which are basically charges from our internal service funds to all the funds, and then some other allocations as well. So all funds expenditure trends by category. You can see you have capital outlay on top, debt service, depreciation. That's not a budgeted item. It's only an item that shows up in the actuals. Interfund charges, which are those transfers and allocations between funds. Then you have operating and maintenance, cost of personnel, and then those transfers. So major revenue sources for the general fund are taxes. Property tax is about a quarter, sales tax is 17%, and utility taxes and franchise fees is 13%, and beginning fund balance isn't a revenue, but it's a source, it's a funding source, that's 21%, and then 24% is everything else. So expenditures by department in the general fund, you can see them all listed here in alphabetical order. City Council on the top, And then it goes all the way down to recreation, the new department for the general fund. So we have this chart that shows the fund balance status from 2023 to 2026. The beginning fund balance in 2023 was about $3.4 million, and we ended up with 6.7. And then we ended up, and we're projecting to end up at the end of 2024 with 7.6. Then going into 2025, it looks like we'll be going to, by the end of the biennial, to about $4.1 million. So based on we started at 3.4, we're ending up to about 4.1. So that's a overall 4-year increase of about 700,000. The reason for some of the expenditures in the general fund, bargaining agreements, non-represented COLAs, recreation fund shift over to the general fund, and also personnel requests. We also have the new facility and infrastructure replacement reserve. We have capital projects. That's split into two. We have carry forward capital projects, are basically projects that won't be finished this year, and the funding and the budget will be carried forward to the following year, to 2025. And also we have new capital projects like the police and city hall roofs, new patrol cars, et cetera. And we also have the decision packages that are included in the budget that we went over in detail in the September meeting, and also recreation. Here's the chart for streets funds. Most of this hasn't changed much from the September meeting, so I'll just kind of go through this pretty quickly. We're running pretty low on streets by the end of the biennial, like we talked about a little earlier. Creative arts, that's funds are being used, but we're generating funds coming in. That changes. It uses about 60 or 70 over the 4 years. The lodging tax improvement, this is basically the LTAC fund. This is the fund where the LTAC funds come out of. We've been drawing down those funds, and we're projected to continue to draw down those funds to the end of 2026. Now, I don't know what the council is going to provide for the next round of LTAC, but I just made an assumption. I used the same number that the council provided for 25. So that could change, obviously, based on what the council approves. We have the water funds. You can see that the fund balance has been changing from about 4.8. It's going down to 422, but that's because of the facility infrastructure reserve. A lot of the fund balance is basically just going over to the facility infrastructure reserve to ensure we have enough funding to replace all of our infrastructure and facilities in the future. Same thing with wastewater. Solid waste again, except for solid waste, we do have a little bit of an issue with the increases to the tipping fees, so we will have to talk about revenues. Storm drain, same type of thing. We have some funds going away, mostly in 2025, going into the facility reserves. And then we have the marina funds. The marina fund is getting pretty close to having to dip into the operating reserve, and that's basically not so much based on operating costs, but it's based on putting money aside for some of the projects that we talked about earlier, and other capital projects that have already been budgeted. So our long-term capital plan, it changed slightly from September. For the 2 years, for the biennial, it's $62.9 million. And for the 6 years, it's about $130 million. And you can see that it's split between the general fund, other governmental funds. Marina is very large, based on what we programmed in for 2026 as far as potential, marina projects that we discussed a little bit earlier. And here are your funding sources. We have a decent amount of carry forward funding sources from previous years. The largest chunk is either grants or new debt. And then we also have about a quarter of the funding will come from new funding. And future items that we already flagged that we're not able to make it into this item, there's just 2 items that we found so far. We need $30,000. We need a $30,000 increase for a new roof on the respite center. It's a modular. It has a 22-year-old roof. It needs to be replaced. And then also there's some additional carry forward for the marina dredging projects. It's already in the fund. We just need to show it in the budget. And we will also be making some tweaks to the programs and performance measurements. So that concludes the budget section of the presentation. And this is a great time to have a discussion on some of the items that we talked about earlier before we move into the next section.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Counselor Wiesner, you have a question.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. David, do you, and it might have been that chart that showed the overall budgets, but do you have a number that you can show us of the increase in budgets? Because we got budgets going up, right? But a lot of this is internal, right? It's the moving of the money, the sweeping of the beginning balance funds, which was sitting there doing nothing, and putting them into this reserve fund for capital projects. Have you got a breakout for us that says, okay, this of this $10 million increase in the budget in 2025, $8.3 million of it is actually an internal transfer into this capital reserve fund?
All right, yeah. Well, I did that for the general fund. So
I'd like to see it for the overall budget for the city. I mean, and again, it's for my edification, but it's also for the public's edification, right? Because I want them to understand, we're increasing, expenditures on paper by $25 million. Well, in this $12 million, 2024 to 2025. But of that, it looks like what, 10 point?
Yeah, this might help right here.
Okay.
So you can see, here's the 24 budget, $96 million. Here's the 25 budget, 109, let's round it, $109 million. So what's changing? So it's not capital, because that's actually going down. It's not debt service, because we're refinancing the clean water facility debt, so that's actually going down. We don't count depreciation, because that's not part of the budget. It's an actual thing we have to do for the financial reports. Here's really where it's happening. You have the interfund charges, which are those allocations between the internal service funds, including the facility and facility infrastructure reserve, and all the other funds. Here you also have operating and maintenance. That's going up by 4.4, but there is capital in there. When we're doing a roof replacement, it doesn't show up in the capital fund. It shows up in the operating fund because it's a repair. We just have to show it in there.
And you get what I'm trying to achieve
But
for
you
the
can
public.
see-
What I'd like to see is, okay, the 2025 budget, if you back out that internal deposit that we're making these first couple of years, because we're making some pretty big sweeps.
Yeah.
These first couple of years to get those, what you rolled back, 3 or 4 years for the investment of the capital when you were calculating the sweeps?
Yeah, we went back 2 years because that's when the rate study was adopted. And you could see it's mostly here. You see transfers in 26 goes down to 4.2, but you see how this is 10.9? That's really, the reason for that is really that.
Well, and again, I'm trying to make it simple, right? Would it be really nice to be able to look somebody in the eye and say, hey, our $96 million budget, once you back out those transfers, right, is going to be a $97 million budget in 2025, not a $108 million. But right. I mean, I want some talking points,
Yeah, I got it.
right, when we're out in the public, so that the public knows that we're really not increasing our budget by over 10%, right? That this is internal fund transfers, which gets really confusing to people who don't deal with government bookkeeping, right? That the reality is, this is what our budget is once we pull out those internal transfers, which is actually just good investment strategy that we're building funds internally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got it. Okay.
Thank you, Counselor Wiesner. Counselor Stuckey.
2 questions about the staffing. Communications intern, was that something we were?
So I participated on the strategic plan with the Oak Harbor School District. And what we learned is that one of the ways that we can help our local students is by helping them get involved in local community activities and programs, and they have a design course. We also need, the communications officer, Maggie Aguilar, would like some help during our busy seasons with some of the communications we work on. They've worked with other organizations, and what they do is a student is able to apply for either in their latter years of high school, in their junior, senior year, or in the early, like if you're at Skagit Valley College, and those design students can actually work on city projects for communications that we're doing, and then what they would have is items to put in their portfolio going forward.
Does it have to be paid?
We have realized that paid internships are a better way of doing that. It's a minimal cost, but it is allowing the students to also make some income for the work that they're producing.
Do you know what the salary would be?
We looked at the seasonal rate to start with. And typically with seasonal rates, like if that student were to come back a next term or the next year, we might increase that rate slightly, but that's what we were, I think it was somewhere around $20, but I'd have to look.
Sure. And then the code enforcement officer, I mean, that's been part-time for a while. Are we talking about a retirement and then hiring a new? Like why are we going part-time to full-time there?
Thank you for that question. Good question. And as we've learned in the past, we don't talk much about people's pending retirements. But we have heard that maybe we'll have a retirement next year, possibly. And if that does happen, the position in that, or the person in that position is quite efficient, has been doing it 20 years. And we think there would be some lag time and a need to have a little more staffing time to cover at the same production rate that the current person is. We've also looked at other possibilities in the city that I think we'll explore, sharing jobs with other departments as a possibility. So just going from part-time to full-time is one option. The other option is possibly using that money and having two different code enforcement officers, both retired police officers possibly, and they can usually only work part-time on that particular program. So a couple different options we're exploring, and that's the reason why we're asking for more money to be able to get those kinds of economies of scale that we're looking for.
And I will be honest, I mean, I know what the job entails, but I don't know hour-wise how much is really needed. As I understand, it's mostly, when it comes to code enforcement, it's mostly complaint-driven. Someone's not driving around and saying, oh, that looks amiss, or that. It's mostly complaint-driven. I understand having someone who's very experienced and replacing them with someone who's not as experienced and then being able to take a little more time to do those things. It just seems like if you're going from full-time, part-time to full-time, after a little bit of time, once they're up to speed, it'd be nice to get something a little extra out of them if we're going to increase that position. I mean, do you feel that we have enough complaints that it's going to warrant that increase, even if that person had the same efficiency?
Well, I can tell you we're not proactive enforcement normally. We do act on complaints. If we ever do proactive enforcement, it's because someone has been complained upon and we drive down the street and we see somebody next door or across the street has the same situation. So we will proactively do enforcement in that case. But normally we don't do that. We don't want to be the kind of agency that's driving around looking at neighborhoods and writing people up. So I think as far as being able to reach full-time employment and have other duties that could be done, I think that's possible. I think maybe we have opportunities to share duties among departments, and we currently are doing that. I think with our flood control enforcement, as well as some of our grease receptors in restaurants, we have shared duties between our code enforcement officer and the Public Works Department over the course of the last couple of years. We've also explored looking at the police department. Possibly we could share some work with them. So that's the reason why we are hoping to go to full-time.
Okay, and that's really a discussion for another time. I don't want to get too in the weeds with that. I just want a little bit of clarity. You know, when you mentioned sharing, it does seem like it is not unusual for us to hire someone for a very specific purpose and a very specific role, find out there's not enough work, and, oh, well, we'll use you for this. Oh, well, we'll use you also for that, which is fine as long as we can justify the extra work. What I don't want is us to have a full-time position that's really part-time and then just, oh, we feel bad, we hire you full-time. Let's find some other things for you to do. But again, I don't want to drag down this whole discussion on what's really a minor dollar amount in the city budget.
Councilmember Stuckey, I think one of the things too is when David did the meeting with the different departments to talk about our different budget requests, the sharing was a discussion that came up amongst the different directors and chiefs as there are potentials around that. The other thing is we realized recently is there's some training required or some certifications, I should call them, for some of the things that we used to do that have had process changes or requirement changes. And there'd be more time needed to incorporate that into that schedule. So just as a heads up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Stuckey. Councilor Arms, do you have any questions for David? I have a couple of questions, and I might be getting a little ahead of myself here. The interfund transfers. Does the city charge, we charge our individual departments for the work that they do, but do we charge the public or an organization for the costs associated with an event? Like all of the public works, all the streets, the waste, the marina, when stuff like that comes up, I know that our departments bill each other. Does the city bill the entity that's having an event in town?
That is something that is a challenge, I will say right now. I'm getting shaking hands. We are looking at that with special events in the master fee schedule, but I don't know how close we can get to the actual cost we have. I will say in streets, Rick Fakema did a good job of providing Mikhail, when she was doing special events, with some of those costs. I want to throw out a number and say $10,000. She might come running in here to tell me I was wrong, but it is a impact to staff. There are additional costs there. In Parks and Rec, there's the dealing with the different buildings that we're renting out in the facilities, even in Windjammer Park. So there are costs associated, and that's part of the next discussion about the master fee schedule and how we can work towards getting there.
Thank you. Yeah, okay, I'll hold the rest of my thoughts on that because I'm getting ahead of ourselves. I have just a teeny tiny suggestion for David. It would be really helpful if you would put visible page numbers on your presentations.
Oh.
That way, when we're asking questions, we can say, go back to slide 6 or whatever. Thank you. And Steve Schuler, what is the current recycling situation outlook? I remember several years ago, it might have been 4 or 5 years ago, the cost of curbside recycling like doubled overnight, and we were
Right.
totally unprepared for it. It's still going up, but it's leveled out a little. What is the current market? I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, no, and just talking to Sabrina, we just looked into that recently on some good grants that Sabrina and Wendy had proposed. And so the short answer is based on my, Google research of 20 minutes, I don't know. It is still very chaotic, and Sabrina might have a better answer in that she has more contacts in that area, but it is really unknown. Each of those areas, so for example, Exxon is getting sued over the fact that, only 5% or 10% of actual plastic bottles are actually getting recycled. So, what's the right recycling pun? It's a mess. Yeah. So it's very difficult to understand how that applies to us and what's the right financial decisions we should making, because a lot of it's what's happening on the other end. And then with China's collapse and other areas collapse, those things aren't coming back, they appear. And there's a lot of good work that's happening where so the positive is that because of this complete collapse, and a lot of our recycling, let's be honest, was going to China, and we were like, hey, we recycled. Now I'm going to add a little color to this, And we're like, hey, we did it. And, well, it really wasn't getting recycled. Well, the good news is that now there's real investments, that's the other articles that you can see, in the United States to really do a better job of recycling mixed paper. The mixed paper is very difficult because a little bit of contamination, and I know with me now, I read an article where pizza boxes are notorious. We're just a little bit of grease in your pizza box. So now I rip my pizza boxes in half and I put the clean one in and the other one goes in the garbage, right?
Same thing.
So yeah, I know each of you, have good stories on how we try to do our part. So the mixed paper is difficult, the actual plastic bottle thing is difficult, and it's a state of flux.
Thank you for that explanation. I'll have to do some more research. Yeah, it's difficult to project when we're paying someone else to do a service, and they could change their fee structure at any time, like our water or our solid waste. So,
Well, we were notified back in September on the potential increase for recycling. They're anticipating it to be about 3%. So it is a lot less than the tipping fee.
Recycling costing more?
Yeah,
money than
recycling-
garbage?
Oh,
It was that way for a while.
Oh, I don't know the breakdown. Yeah, she's, yeah.
Well, and I've been talking to George about glass recently because some cities, I think it was Skagit County, sent out a notice saying they weren't going to collect glass anymore. And we're not in that position, so I really appreciate the team working on that, so.
I think, it was one of your first slides, David, and it had a list of Parks and Rec asks that weren't included in the mayor's proposed budget.
Sure.
So seeking some clarification, this is a request from Parks and Rec over and beyond what's in the
Correct.
current proposed budget.
Yes.
Where would, I guess this would be a Brian Smith question. If we were to go above and beyond the budget, do you have a proposal for how we would come up with this money? Is this just like an investment and hoping that things continue to pick up and pay for themselves? I'd like a little more detail.
In fact, Tim, there's a file in the presentation folder on how we calculate out the program. So so what's in there is new programming. It is it's like recreation list.
Count on revenues to offset it.
So this just gives you an example of how we calculate out expenditures and revenues for each program. So we go through this exercise through this model. It's a cost recovery model that gives us basically what our participation minimums need to be, and what our minimum net revenue would be, what the maximum would be. It gives us our spread. Now we have in the proposals.
Thank you, Tim.
We have sports leagues, we have summer camps, we have the activity guide, community events, and then 2 subsidized programs for underserved populations. We're going after sponsorships for events and the 2 programs. Those revenues are not reflected in like the team club, but if you pull those out, because we're not going to be running them without some kind of sponsorship support, and you just look at the new programming, summer camps, and all the different sports programs, and just the regular programming that's in there. Our revenue amount for 2025 is $182,000. So it gives us with $134,000 in expenditures, gives us $48,000 net revenue, just for the programming side of it.
Yeah, it's, if you put recovery of cost there, there's always an initial investment to do the thing.
Yeah, some programs have, right, an upfront, supply or equipment type cost to those, but those all end up balancing out. We have our cost recovery model set to be net revenue positive.
All right. Get back to it. We'll get that up in a minute. All right. Yep. So the next part of the presentation is about the master fee schedule. So annually, we update the master fee schedule around the end of the year for the fees to take effect at the beginning of the year. There'll be the normal updates that we do, but there'll be some areas that we just like to focus in on today to kind of broach the subject for future discussions. The fee schedule is made up of a bunch of different schedules. It's a master fee schedule. Development Services is Schedule A, Fire Inspection Schedule C, and Parks and Recreation is Schedule G and Addendum 2. So everything I'm going to talk about has not been budgeted yet. It's pending council discussions and decisions. So the first part I'd like to talk about are development services fees. At the beginning of 2023, development services user charges, not including like building permits or building services, but more the planning and zoning and those kind of development review fees, they were set to increase per the Seattle CPI automatically. Just so happens, in December of 2022, CPI was running at 8.4%. So the council decided just to change the code to remove that automatic adjustment. But nothing ended up being adjusted at all at the end of 23, and then that stayed the same. No adjustment for this year either. So those development fees weren't changed for about 2 years now. And we ran some numbers just to take a look at what our coverage looks like, because in the code it says that we should be taking a look at how the revenues cover the cost of doing planning and zoning. And you can see that I highlighted 23% here in 2023. That was the high mark. 24, this is budget. This is not an actual, but based on budget, it's lower than 23%. But basically, the average is about 19% over the years you see there. Next slide. So we went ahead and used the state auditor's financial intelligence tool, and the state auditors are in the building, so I'm going to give them props. And they have information on every city and every county and every governmental agency in the state of Washington. And we pulled the same bars numbers that we use for planning and zoning, not building, but planning and zoning for revenues and expenses. And we put this chart together. This is all the cities between population 18,000 and 40,000, 2023 information. And you can see if you squint, you can see it, that the average coverage, the average amount of revenues that covers the expenses is about 52 to 53%. And we're at a lower percent. We're at 23% based on the actuals for 23. So, we took a look at that. Also, you might notice some cities are over 100%. That happens when, a developer comes in with a lot of homes or a lot of development. They pay up front, and then the reviews and the inspections are going to happen over the course of a few years. So that money gets set aside in a reserve, and it has to be spent on those inspections and reserves. So, but basically, this is the average. So, as far as the master fee schedule, we're going to make suggestions about how to update the fees, and we have a few options we put together for this, keeping in mind these are no longer automatically increasing, and they haven't been adjusted for 2 years. We could simply adjust it per CPI. CPI is running at about 3%, 3.1% in August. We'll find out what it is, next month or the month after. We'll find out what the October number is. We can reinstate that language that was taken out 2 years ago with the automatic annual increases, but put boundaries. So we can have a maximum of 4%. So in case inflation gets crazy again, it never goes over 4%. And we can put a base of 1%, because our costs are always going up, whether it's, salary increases or just the cost of, materials and supplies. So you can do that. In addition, we can do a cost of service study. I don't think we've either ever done this or haven't done it in a long time. Basically, we have an expert come in, or we can maybe do it in-house and just look at how much time it actually takes to review and inspect all the planning and zoning work, and come up with a cost per hour, and with, just make sure it's fully loaded, and just do a study like that, just to find out what the actual costs are and come up with a number that would cover those costs. Or we can just do nothing and not raise it, not adjust it again. So, that's an option. So anyway, that's development services. The next one is something that our fire chief brought up about a month ago. We do fire inspections right now for commercial properties and for multifamily properties. We don't charge. We just do it. And we found some other nearby agencies. Central Whidbey. We also handle Coopville. They have a rate where the charge for the inspections starts at $25 for Island County. Coopville's a little bit higher. And then we also looked at Everett as well. And it's based on the building size, square footage. For multifamily, I think it's based on units, but we can design it however we want. And just quickly, I looked at the parcel database, found all the properties that would be applicable to this, and just a quick and dirty calculation, about 400 properties, and depending on the rate schedule, if we were to decide to adopt this, it can raise anywhere between $24,000 and $44,000, and that could help offset costs for like a fire marshal and inspection activities. And then lastly, we talked a lot about Parks and Recreation today. There's various fees associated with parks programs, well, Parks and Recreation programs. The first thing we'd like to do is rename Addendum 2 from Senior Services to Recreation. That's easy. But also we'd like to bring forward something a little bit more flexible. Like right now, the fee schedule calls out specific classes like fitness and yoga. The classes that will be offered in the future, we might not have the exact name for it now, but we might want to see if we can build in some kind of flexibility with the schedule. That's all. But we'll come up with a proposal and provide that to council to review at the next workshop. And of course, any kind of rate changes or restructuring, we'll communicate this to the customers prior to them signing up. It'll either be online, will be on the porthole where you sign up with Civic Rec. It'll be in our communications that go out to, all the residents and so on. But we'll make sure that it's understood what the rates will be. And that's all we have right now for the master fee schedule. There'll be other things that we're talking about. I think Sabrina mentioned something about, events. There might be things like that.
Special events, cost of service.
Yeah. So there'll be other things, but these are the three things that we just wanted to broach with the council now, just to, get your mind thinking about it, and we'll be bringing more information in the future. But yeah, definitely we would like to hear some input, and if you have any items you would like to talk about.
Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. On the development side of things, I like the idea, obviously, I think of making sure that we're aligning our costs with the actual time to serve. One of the reasons we did not take that CPI last couple of years is, quite frankly, it's kind of hard to sit up here and talk about how unaffordable housing is and how we are, trying to make housing more affordable and then raise rates just to raise them, whether or not we need them or not. I never have a problem raising a rate if there's a justification for it, but to just say, okay, well, we're going to jack everything up 5% because the cost of living went up 5%, and we're going to be part of the problem, right? Part of the creep, right? And I get it's minuscule in the scope of things, but again, we're a little bit hypocritical if we say we want to be part of the solution and then we're just jacking up fees just because we can. So I like the idea of conducting a cost of service study, but I want to put a twist into it. I would like us to continue to look at tiered development costs, right? I think it's a way for us to promote affordable housing by making sure that we're charging the lowest fee possible for those types of construction that would be considered affordable, right? Somebody building a 4,000 square foot house can certainly afford more in development costs and permit fees and stuff than somebody building a $200,000 house. And I know part of that's done through the building permit fees. We charge a portion of the cost of development, right? So that's scaled. But some of our permitting fees aren't necessarily scaled. And I for a town that doesn't have money to put into affordable housing projects, what can we do? Well, we can offer some sort of a discount rather than, taking money literally out of our pocket and writing a check to help incentivize that. And again, this is all part of the comp plan discussion and, how do we, get more of this 0 to 50% AMI housing. Well, we have to be the leaders, right? We have to help promote that, and we have to help, that happen in our community. And I think it's another justification that we are doing everything we can to get to those numbers by having categorized. And so if we do conduct a cost of service study, I'd like to take an example of like a home, under 1,400 square feet and a home over 1,400 square feet, and see if the cost of service changes, right? You're reviewing a smaller plan, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know, but I think it's an opportunity for us to tweak and do so to benefit the affordable housing side. So that's my thoughts on that. And then the next stuff you brought up, David. Yeah, so fire, here's the issue I have with fire, and no offense, Chief, but, we just got done raising business license fees last year, right? And I'd be hesitant to put another additional cost on business till we kind of let that settle in. I value those inspections. When the guys show up to inspect one of my 15,000 square foot buildings, I don't kick them out. I actually look at that as a yeah, well, I don't think you can, number one, but I actually look at that as a service, and I am willing to pay for that service, but I also look at the fact you just raised my business license fees, and isn't that part of the service provided to the community? So I just don't know that timing's right for that. So that's my input on that. And thanks for giving us the opportunity to provide that.
Counselor Stuckey.
I hadn't thought about that with the fire inspection fees, but that's a good point. But question with the fire inspection fees, is the mentality is just most places charge, we're not charging, so we should start charging, or are we going to be given as businesses anything additional?
Well, I can tell you that, I've only been here for, it's like 10 weeks now. One thing I asked was, to get in and see how many business inspections we're doing. So right now, our fire marshal has collateral duties of also being the deputy fire chief, right? So leading some of the operations and doing some of that stuff. And they're also the person that does all the plans examining and all the new permitting and occupancy permits. So they're busy doing that. So what it leaves is when on-duty crews have time to go out and do business inspections, and they're not necessarily the highest trained person like a fire marshal to go do business inspections. So of the correct me if I'm wrong, 800 or 900 businesses that we have in the city that are licensed. We had done about 150 for the year of crews going out and getting there. So, we know that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. We know that 60% of all small businesses that have a fire never reopen again, and our focus is on fire prevention. And I just, I've been advocating that. I know this year we're not getting any new personnel other than the exchange of having paid on call and full-time firefighters, and that's pretty much a wash when it comes to the cost. But I think in the future we need to look at that being a specialty role of being a fire marshal and just looking at avenues to offset that cost. But it'd be a much better service to our community, to our business owners, by having a dedicated fire marshal that could focus his time on fire prevention, community risk reduction, than just having our on-duty firefighters that go through a fire academy, don't necessarily go through all the fire training to actually understand, fire codes. That's a beast in its own.
Does North Whidbey Fire have a fire marshal that inspects those that are in county?
They don't. The fire protection districts, it's actually a county function, and there's been a lot of battle going on right now, so they're trying to get the county to hire a fire marshal. And so right now there is not a fire marshal for any of the jurisdictions.
Okay, and then when it comes to parks, and maybe it was on there, I was trying to see, is there any thought to increasing the cost of facility rentals? I mean, I look at, say, my son we had a birthday party for my son, and we spent $25 for the pavilion over at Fort Nugent. I mean, on the one hand, you don't want to raise them so high that people will just use the pavilion and not pay, so I understand that. But if that 25 went up to 40 or something, I'm just thinking $25. I'm like, is this even paying for someone to come grab the trash can? So I didn't know if that was something that would be on the docket, or if it's even worth it. I mean, wow, this will get an extra, $5,000 a year. Maybe it's not even a discussion, but I didn't know if that was in the works of possibly looking at as well as facility rentals.
It is. It's one of the items that Mikhail joined us, our executive services coordinator. She's the one coordinating with everybody to go with her title on the master fee schedule, and it is one of the items that she's working with Parks and Recreation on. So she's also here if you have specific questions to her about that.
Just a general statement. If we were looking at possibly an increase in that, or maybe you have some.
They're
yes.
being increased.
Okay.
We have the draft. We'll bring it to you.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Yeah, I think, yeah, historically, we know we're way undercharging, but yeah, that's the difference, would the difference be and it's just kind of a service we provide. But on that note, on services we provide, I want to circle back to my interfund transfer question. And does the city bill for support services that are not city-related but take up staff time?
So we are going to be redoing for special events, redoing the special event permit, and we are adjusting the fees associated with that. We've been working with Rick and staff over in Public Works on getting the costs of those. It won't be a 100% cost recovery, but it will be a much higher cost recovery, and we'll show you those comparables when we get to it. But these are areas that we really need to have some hard discussions around. For instance, we maintain the school district, a couple fields for the school district, right? For Fort Nugent and Volunteer Park, Fort Nugent is about $75,000 that is a cost to the city for maintaining those fields. Volunteer Park's about a third of that, so it's a little over $100,000 for maintaining another agency's property. The fees we get from leagues for the use of those fields, obviously it's hardly a dent in that. So those are all things that we're taking into consideration. And when we bring the draft for the fee schedule, we'll go into those in more detail.
We need to have some kind of, discussion in terms of cost recovery when it comes, I think, to special events. I was thinking about this when I was looking at the LTAC. I'm choosing my words. If the city is going to provide support to events, if it's a small event that's getting off the ground and they've only been doing it for a couple years, I think it makes a lot of sense for the city to help support that. If that's a really well-established event, like the music festival or the hydroplane races or something, I'm just wondering if all of that extra time, all those hours, all that expense, we've got streets, we've got law enforcement, it's just everything. Someone's paying all the marina staff to be ferrying people around on hydroplane weekend. We're paying them to do that, but who's paying us to do that? So I want to come up with something that's fair and that's equitable. I don't want to make hosting an event so expensive for an organization, that it's prohibitive. But I think a lot of people don't realize that the people emptying the garbage cans and the police officers out there on bicycles and the fire truck, those people are all being paid, and probably weekend pay. So that has to be accounted for somewhere, so where do you find the balance of maintaining a sense of community, and this is a service that we provide that everybody pitches in for, and where are you just giving services away at a level that's not sustainable? I'm hoping that staff would speak up if things became unsustainable, but that's something that's in the back of my head all the time.
I would say that they have been.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
Obviously, Public Works has been eating the cost of every street closure for
Yeah.
a special event forever. And there are efficiencies and things that we can transfer over. We were being asked to go around to, half a dozen different parks and pull all the picnic tables out to bring in for one event. There was no fee associated with that or support of the city doing that. We just say
That's a whole day of multiple people's work.
It's 2 days, So simply saying, we're not going to provide that service for $200. You can get all the rentals you want, and here's the contact for that. Little things like that we can make adjustments for. Is that something the city actually has to do, or is that something that we could put on the event organizers? Sort of things like providing police presence or road closure assistance, might not be things that we could put onto them. So we are looking at a way to structure that where those costs make sense for the type of event and the scale of the event, and mostly the impact that it has on city resources.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's something I'm concerned about approaching in an equitable but sustainable way. So I appreciate that is a consideration, and I'd like to hear more ideas moving forward. And I'm sure it would differ depending on each individual event or whatever, but, yeah, I think that we need to kind of dig into that. I think that was my only, Counselor Wiesner.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I think the way to make that equitable, we've got probably 6 or 7 major players in the special events community here. Let's bring them to the table, right? It's going to be a very easy decision for council if you come to us with a fee schedule and we know you've sat down with the stakeholders and gone through that. It's going to be a very easy decision for us, right? If you come to us with a major change in that fee schedule and we haven't engaged those folks, then obviously we've got a pretty major task to put ahead of us, because then we have to weigh out, are we going to reduce the number of events in our community by doing that? Those are all things that are going to go through our head, which, come to, part of our major job, right? Making this a better community to live in. So I would just certainly suggest, as one of those guys that you'd probably invite to the table, that we all just sit down and talk about it. I know I can certainly speak for Hydros in the fact that we're willing to pay our fair share, right? The money comes away from the charity, granted, but at the same time, so there's a certain amount we can absorb before we get to the point, well, why even do it if we don't have money to donate, because we do it for a cause. But at the same time, I think it's a reasonable expectation to have, and just, I think, bring everybody to the table, and I think that's the easiest solution to address all of your concerns.
I think that's a great suggestion. Any further council input, questions, feedback? Staff, is there anything that we should have asked you but didn't? Anything you forgot to say but wished you did? Nothing? Okay, all right. Mr. Goldman, are you finished with your presentation, or is that the end, or is there another part?
It is complete.
Oh, wow.
So November 6th will be the first public hearing, and that's when we'll bring it back.
Wednesday, November 6th.
Wednesday, November 6th.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
That's all.
Council, staff, thank you everyone for your patience. Appreciate it. That wasn't as painful as I thought it would be. So, at 4:57, we are adjourned. Thank you.